think I am as ready as I'll ever be.
Psychologically, emotionally, physically, spiritually.
America is here, on the edge of something new. I know it's time to steer, we're chasing after something clear. Wander through the mix, I'll be here to guide the way. Take my hand, we'll break away. Okay, we are here, here we are. Make things great one more time, so don't delay. Save all that's left. Make things great one more time, and you'll see.
It's a vibe right there, yo. How's it going?
Here we are.
Dude.
Hi, Andreas. How are you?
Pretty good. I was surprised to see that the world isn't over and everyone else is all excited too. It's like China, Russia, Arab Emirates. It's like, you know, all of our like wrestling partners are coming out like excited that we're gonna get back to like America being, you know. And it's also kind of weird because it feels so stick and carrot. Like Kamala's such a stick. It's like, hey, come on, if you want to pay more taxes, stick. If you don't want, you obviously you want to pay more taxes, you want it to be harder, stick. And then Trump's like, lower taxes, which is carrot. We'll feed you a carrot. And so it just feels very like, you know, there's never, who said this? There's never been an election that the federal bank hasn't won since they sunk the Titanic, you know?
I would assume so, yes. I'm wondering what type of operation he will pull out of the hat this time.
Well, probably not a child sex change operation. That's kind of what people keep saying. They're like, whatever happens, at least we're swinging the pendulum back towards the Christian right, you know? And that also scares me a lot because as much as transgender transvestites reading to kids in a library, I can kind of sympathize. You don't want your kids being read to by strangers in general, okay? But that future, that present, was far more liberal. If you think about the objective idea of that, that is a far more liberal reality than where we're heading, which is basically the restriction reality. And so many people are like, we don't want these people in our bathrooms. That's a slippery slope to like black people having their own water fountains, right? Like you've got to see where segregation can lead. And I'm not saying that's immediate. I mean, come on. You got to think about it though. Like it's a kind of mentality that is dangerous because once you say that's the way it is, that certain people should be in certain places and protected for their certain social and gendered class status, you know, that can go pretty far too, right? So it's interesting because I don't think anyone was super the authority of righteousness on these arguments over the protection of the woman versus the disestablishment of engendered caste system stereotypes, right? Like, honestly, we could have done so much more by destroying the kitchen than by destroying gender. If we had just replaced the kitchen with Japanese appliances, that would have done more to socially change what we think of a woman or a man, right? I think that's all we needed.
You are probably correct. However, as you certainly are aware of, that was simply not the purpose or the goal of the whole thing. And by
Okay,
now I
Miss
have to
Cleo,
say,
the cars don't lie.
looking back at like 30 years, the past 30 years or whatever, whenever this so-called, you know, hyper woke change your self agenda has been in full effect publicly, let's say, in retrospect, it may well be these were all just fake conversations, I want to say, or a gaslighting, let's just call it overall, and potentially even with the desired effect of then having the pendulum swing back right now, because it really seems that, yeah, as I said, this is deliberately made so provocative, so it gets on everybody's nerves, So now everyone is so happy that this will be rolled back, and maybe not be exactly as careful as to what else will be rolled out further, maybe even without, you know, any delay or any market change from administration to administration, because those are the real, let's say, core tracks that whatever class that, you know, likes to be in power is pursuing, such as digital ID, such as potential, you know, messianic prophecies. I'm not sure I'm exactly happy with how Trump, in a way, has deified himself,
Bro, it's the golden age. You got to understand.
accomplished the apotheosis
It is
within
the
this
golden
life.
age. I mean, what are you gonna do? Like, it's not his fault.
And then what you have, of course, this is, you know, just coming in. I even saw Paranoid American, shout out, talk about this yesterday on a different show. I guess this show was somewhere else because he only reposted it, talking about Elon Musk's tweet, or how is it still called a tweet? Is it now called an X that he's sending?
I like saying Xting. It just sounds good. I X'd you last night, babe.
And he said, you know, Novus Ordo Seclorum, you also had him dancing around, looking suspiciously like the Baal Moloch pictures during that one rally. And apparently, I hadn't heard this live, but he was like, oh, I am dark Gothic MAGA. And then if you know MAGA, Magus, all these connections, you look at what I hadn't looked at so much before, the whole Roy Cohen connection with Trump, who is a very interesting, strange figure. And considering that this was a great effect upon Trump, well, then I'm not sure what I can say about this. So I think they are very good at portraying a particular idea towards the outside. It may well be that there are certain factions, you know, infighting, but then still, even though Trump now claims that he was always trying to tone it down, but you had the chorus chanting, lock her up, I'll remind everyone again, for a long time. And I would assume that there are many individuals claiming that there would be many different reasons, for example, for Hillary Clinton not to, I don't know, run for another office, not to say to potentially be behind bars. But yeah, here you can just see it's obviously a political play. It's not really about truth and justice or anything like that. And I'm not expecting that's what it's going to be about now. What I do expect is very good propaganda in terms of, you know, effectively and with public effect rolling back things like closing down the fourth bathroom they have now, or removing certain books from the school library or something. But is that really going to be the grand effect? I don't know. And also, I'm not sure what other tracks they have set up, even with the whole, what's his name, Bobby Kennedy thing. I'm curious how much he will really do to fundamentally change education or nutrition in the United States. I'm all ears. You're muted, Andreas. Oh, you're not talking to me. Then it's okay. All right. Well, what we can do in this case, oh, we'll see. So now I'm left to my own devices, but that's okay. You guys just bear with me for a second.
Any better now?
then-
Getting the audio working yet?
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Okay, so
good now.
basically, I think that's on a couple levels there. One, it's awesome because you're like, hey, you know what? Good for you. You got everything you need to make the world a better place. If you do your job, we're all going to be grateful. So many people, this is the opposite. This is what Trump wanted the first election. Like the first election, he wanted everyone to cheer his name. Like now, you've got so many people saying either, I believe you can do this, or God, I hope Trump does it because the world's falling apart for me. You know, like there's a lot of people that were on the left, but they still know that he's better for the economy than the other solution. So there are so many people hoping for the best, giving him the best, wishes, best optimism, that, yeah, like let's really hope that they do any of the things that they said they're going to, any of them at all. But if they did all of them, yeah, that would be a perfect timeline. I think that's the point. It's like singularity causing timeline where businesses are able to thrive, where there's no regulations holding them back in some Atlas shrugged corporate oligarchy from the 20th century created by the military industrial complex. All of those things being shattered. And he has said, it's different than some politicians, because a lot of politicians will say, we got a problem and I got to come up with a solution. Like, that's what politicians do. What he did for the last couple of years, if you look at Truth Social and his own private bastion of media, he's like, here's what we should do. Like, we should put people in charge that know this and know that. Once Bobby got involved, he's like, we're going to put Bobby in charge of health. We're going to shut down the FDA. And he's talking about how we're going to have trials to put pharmaceutical companies and these drug rep companies that were, the same people that did the opium wars in China and now run the United States. He's talking their name. This is the first time I think a president has ever referred to Big Pharma as Big Pharma. You know what I mean? And he's saying it not in a positive, complimentary light either. He's like, we need to go out against Big Pharma. So this is the first time a president has done that. There's obviously been times where the president said, we have to go and have a war against terror, like ambiguous sort of thing, a war against drugs, right? But that's not what's going on here. He's actually laid out a strategy. And if that strategy, if any of those things are done, particularly if they are all done in order, then there's a reason why people voted for him. It's for a very specific outcome through a very specific process. And you'll know immediately. You've got 3 months or so to start knowing immediately if he's going to do, if POTUS is going to do the things that he promised to happen. My concern, like yours, is that that's never happened before. I get the reasons it didn't. Trump did not have a full Congress on his side. He had the opposite, right? He had a Congress that was against him. He had a media machine that was against him. He had the old government that was against him. There's a lot of excuses that you could make to explain why Trump was stuck working with bad people, hiring the wrong people. And I'm not talking about Roy Cohn, by the way. I like Roy Cohn and Roger Stone, actually. I mean, I would show you the pictures I have of me and Roger, but I don't think that they're YouTube safe. The point is, I think most people like the chances of this specific plan more than just that Trump is the right guy. And a bigger thing about Trump is it's the art of the deal. So many people disenfranchised who didn't want to work with each other ended up working together. I mean, Bobby Kennedy is not a Trump supporter. That's not what he is. They're working together, and that's a different kind. That is the art of the deal. And so a lot of people are excited about that approach, the art of the deal approach. There are some people that don't ever want to make a deal with other people. That's a huge thing. They're like, no, we will not make a deal with these people. And that's isolatory policy.
Sure. So, like I'm telling everyone, and I'll even, publicly admit this here as well, if I were forced at gunpoint and I would have had a vote in the US elections, no way I would have voted for the Democrats.
Well, isn't that kind of the point, is that we were at gunpoint in a lot of ways? I mean, it was basically like, we're going to tax you more, we're going to take away your money, you're going to lose your house. It was gunpoint.
Yes, but the other question here I also want to ask is, of course, you drive people to the election booth again. You make them believe in the process. You make them believe in this whole power hierarchy. Whereas whether or not you for yourself eat organic food or try to source good food is up to you. Whether you put your child into that school is up to you. Whether you go into the, parents board to F them up if they start going crazy at the school district or whatever, it's up to you, right? And I mean, this is anyhow what people have been saying even in Austria when, as I mentioned, the Freedom Party gained. Really, it's almost like a mirrored situation to the US. The only difference being that, as I mentioned here, the whole establishment, except the Freedom Party, is doing everything to stay in power.
Yeah, I think it's the opposite. It's a rerun. So Europe does reruns. Basically, like, I can go to any country in the world and I can watch ER or Scrubs or some show from 20 years ago being remade. All right. And similarly, I could watch Spin City being remade with Zelensky and Servant of the People. So what they do here is they test it on us, and how we react, that's how it gets done. Europe is now 4 or 8 years behind. And so they're doing the Trump first election, where Trump comes into office, but the government's against him. And then that causes a pendulum swing to the left, which causes an economic crisis, which lets the oligarchy buy up all of the stocks, so that in 2030, Austria swings so hard right, it impregnates itself, right? It's going to be crazy. That's basically what's coming. And it's by the book, because you can see it working here.
And then all I'm saying is, don't remind me of the 20th century now.
Yeah, you guys are you have a sore spot about that to be fair. But there were clean water fountains. That's what I'm going to keep pushing. You know what? And you got to remember, like the 60s. It's a weird thing to think about America in the 1960s. Like my parents going to Austria, going to Vienna for college, you know, and they're wearing like army surplus jackets from World War II. Like American kids with like big Birk boots running around, and they're, you know, with these trench coats and these fuzzy hats and everything, and they're driving Volkswagen cars of the people, right? So in a lot of ways, I feel like the integration happened. It just wasn't allowed to happen in Austria and Germany. It's like the last place to really be able to think about World War II the same way as.
I mean, what I have to say is it's just clear with these things that it is scripted, because I mean, it's impossible to know. But to me, it really very much only seems as if the main point is always get as many people to the polls as possible. And then at the end of the night, you can still make up any excuse.
Right.
And it's funny for
I've
me
been wondering how
to...
I'd explain it to my kids, like, because I honestly would be like, yeah, no, this election actually in some ways had effects. Like, it's hard to explain. Obviously, most elections, I can show you a big thing now that's kind of cool that we're allowed to talk about for the first time, is how the 2020 election was stolen. And you weren't allowed to talk about this.
Wait. I'm just saying, this is since November 5th, we can talk about this, or what?
I think since about the 3rd. Yeah. I mean, it was a couple days beforehand. Okay. And so within the year, you were allowed to say you had feelings about it, and now you're allowed to actually just admit it. And so it's great. We're admitting it right now. The election was stolen. And this is an example of where all of these fake votes, right? Here's a duplicate. Here's blue in 2012 election, 2016 election, 2024 election, but in the middle is the 2020 election. Look, there's double the amount of votes. That makes sense, right? And even with red, I think so many more people were supporting Trump in 2020 than they are this year.
Right.
Like crazy amount of people were like not as enthusiastic this time.
And so what I'm saying is, overall, even whatever the sentiment may be, it still seems there's a scripted reality,
right?
And there is how should I say, set pieces, of course, set agendas in the background that will be pushed through regardless. But even as you say, outwardly, because in Austria, even 10, 20 years ago, if a party would, I mean, there was one instance where a party had the most votes, it didn't get in the government. This was in 1990. But except that, they would have never changed the rules or the customs the way they did it now in Austria, only to ensure, just like you said, that it will still stay, maybe now, whatever liberal crazy coalition for a few years.
But that's what's kind of weird about this election. Like, so much has changed. So for instance, Minnesota, if you look at the Electoral College, Minnesota is 10 blue, right? Let me zoom in there for you. You see that 10 blue? I'll make it a little easier for people that haven't been to America. Down. Okay, yeah. Blue, big old blue state. Now we're gonna look at Minnesota's actual voting results. Okay. Boom. This is Minnesota, the blue state. Okay, and when you look at the numbers, they might.
Yeah, and just very briefly, just because I think it's so hilarious, and I think it's not so common in other states, but in the US, it's very known. This idea of gerrymandering, they call it, right? When every time they change the district line outs and so on, and then they make some housing policy to make sure it's working out just about. And even here, I'm like, this is so incredibly fudged. It's amazing.
This is so messed up, because this is Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's vice presidential nominee state, and he's the governor of this state, and he lost his own district. Like, his own town wouldn't vote for him. We hate this guy here, right? And the thing about him being in China, when he talks about being in Tiananmen Square, is like, you know, an SS officer saying, yeah, I was at the Holocaust. You know, like, he acts like it's so impressive that he was there, but he was on the wrong side. You know what I'm saying? Because it's the CRP side. And so that affects the Chinese vote, because Cambodian Holocaust, the amount of people murdered, the Hmong Chinese people, and the Hmong people, which are their own nation, right? They were taken out and brought to California and to Minnesota. So it's a huge anti-PRC, anti-communist West Taiwan population of Chinese people and disenfranchised Asian people from countries that were destroyed by the PRC that are here. So they specifically don't like this guy. You know what I mean? And so they lost not the entire, but a lot of the Asian Minnesota vote was just, no, we're not going to support that guy. Plus, shockingly, people that own restaurants and businesses, right? So they're conservatives. And then there's the Muslims.
Yes.
And the Muslims are pretty conservative. I hate to freak people out on the left who don't know this, but they're rather conservative, patriarchal religion that it's pretty conservative. So there's a lot. There's 5 o'clock prayer hour in Minnesota now, and guess what? Those people are voting for Trump. And it got to the point where if you look at the numbers, there's not enough numbers to even pretend this. You cannot fudge it. The only reason is because Waltz is in charge of the voting. He's the governor's in charge of counting the votes. Okay? That's where we're at. And then also, let me look at this other map again. So this is the map of states that went red, and this is the map of states that went blue. And you'll notice we shattered the blue wall, they called it, right? It's all gone. But let's look over here for a second. This is a similar map, if you'll notice. And this is a map of states with no ID required, right? And what you see is not a single state that required photo ID went to Harris. Any single state that went to Harris did not have photo ID. Any state that went to Harris was a state that you could walk into any place and vote under any name without any evidence of who you were, right? And of those places, like when you even look at the California 2024.
I have to say that's honestly such an amazing system, and also I'm not sure if it's part of gaslighting or whatever, but even just the idea of basically, I don't know, needing more documents to, I don't know a funny example now, but I mean, there was a time when at least you need some QR code in Europe or whatever to enter into a restaurant during the lockdowns.
Right.
But in America, you can literally go vote. I mean, I almost should have tried just to go there as a tourist and then just show up at the election booth.
You could have probably. You
and
probably
be
could
like,
have.
yo,
At least
I
in
wanna
any of the.
vote. Well, certainly I could have voted Democrat. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the other thing from what I saw on the machine, the touch screen, wasn't properly sensitized.
Well,
Have
I
you
was
seen
trying.
these videos, where they click on the one
They
thing?
click on it and it goes the other direction every time. Yeah, totally.
And I have to say, I mean, also here, of course, it's obvious they use these systems because it's the most confusing and easy to manipulate. But I'm like, even here, this is technology they had probably 70 years ago. Why not just simply have 2 huge buttons, and you just click one of these huge buttons and that's it. But of course, with a touchscreen, you can fudge around and maybe people don't notice. They click OK, and then, oh, well, you voted for someone else. Your vote completely thrown out of the window.
I'm trying to find the other one that was blowing my mind, but they only collected half of the votes in California. They stopped counting in California, and they stopped counting when they realized that it was like 46% Trump. So in California, they were showing it on TV. They were like, wow, California race is called 58% in 25%. In 25%, they got this. In other words, they went to the counties they knew were blue. They collected those votes first. Found out that 40% of those counties are actually not blue, and stopped. They freaking stopped. And so when you start looking into California is a freaking red state. It always was a red state. Ronald Reagan.
Are you
came
saying
from
they
California.
stopped counting?
They stopped counting in California.
And they just said, we're just going to call it blue?
We're just going to call it blue because it's blue. It's a blue state. That's what we like. We like it a blue state. Doesn't matter that it's this is 40% in the blue districts. When you start looking at California and you see how red California is, it'll freak you out because it's like a desert with a little bit of coastline, right? And there's a couple coastal cities there that are shockingly not the people that run the city. I mean, because the people that run the city are these rich businessmen who own multi-million-dollar properties, right? There's a lot of conservatives in California, Mexicans that own taquerias that want to keep the taxes down on their boutique business, Italian families, Japanese businesses that have come to California. I mean, there are a lot of conservative Muslims and Indians that work in Silicon Valley. And what they've done is they've gotten to the point where they've displaced their blue vote. And the blue vote wasn't ever the primordial Californian because, again, Republican Ronald Reagan is governor of California. It's only in the 70s into the 80s with immigration, with huge population switches, that a blue period comes in California. But it's never been that the majority of people living in California are solidly blue. there's just some extremely blue places like Berkeley, San Francisco. These are establishment places, and if you go back, these are the
but
places where the Soviet Russian power in the United States were, right? Gorbachev in San
But is it
Francisco.
also true, for example, that I read this somewhere one time, that after, I guess, the Second World War or something, at some point they said, oh, well, we're just gonna drop off everyone we suspect is homosexual in San Francisco or something like that from the army. And that's even where the whole, and that's even where the whole like sailor theme and so on comes from, because yeah, well, they just dumped all of them there. So it's also like, I'm wondering, you know, how organic
sailors are
is
gay.
this?
Military is just the most invariable thing about the military is that it's gay. You know, it's a homoerotic idea. And this is not an American or a Russian or a German thing, but you got to look back at Germany even during the Third Reich and see how gay it was, right? Like the who is it? Ernst Rom. Check this guy out.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
this is the thing.
You know about Ernst Rom, right? You know about Ernst Rom? Yeah. So he was like, if the Führer doesn't love me, then let him stab me himself. He tears his shirt open, and he's like, "Come forward!" Like, this is his lover, right? When you start to think about how gay the military is, it's just men around men, and if you like girls, they think you're too much of a sissy to hang out with them, right? So the Navy, it's the perfect thing if you're gay, because you get on a boat, you get away from your parents, and then you get to be around other men that are strong and have good morals and all that other stuff. I mean, right? The Navy, bro. Good for you.
Well, I can't comment because
this is why this is why America is so into this is why patriotism and LGBTQ, it's like one thing. People don't get that.
Go ahead. The impossible synthesis only at Exertus. Yeah, no, it's correct in a sense. I mean, I wish, how should I say, if it was like, you know, genuine feelings of love or whatever, but as we see with the whole entertainment industry
No, there's
now,
definitely perversion also. I mean, like, they're gays
we have
are
the
just
whole
as perverted
trauma
as
bonding,
heterosexuals.
You know,
bunch of gays
RA
right here.
thing and so on. And
bunch of gays.
Yeah.
Gays. Gay. This guy might not have been gay. This, just to be fair,
Is
this
it
one guy.
Is it allowed to call him that and not be, how do you call it then, bigoted or something?
They're actually gays. What, are you kidding me? They love Hugo Boss fashion. Hitler's last meal was spinach raviolis. I mean, just because he's a vegetarian who painted dogs doesn't mean he's gay. But if he's gay, and I'm just saying, Goring was a propaganda theater opera freak. I love opera. I'm not saying I'm gay, but I mean, Goring.
Yeah, and I'll just say, also recently, even I stumbled across another one of these testimonies from back then, and this was interesting because it was a guy whose father was actually the commander for Hitler in the First World War, and of course later on, just like with, I guess, what is his name, Kim Jong-il, Kim Il-sung, and the newest one maybe not so much, but they always make up these war stories about them, how great they are and all of that. And this guy, whose father was commanding Hitler in the First World War, said, oh, well, he wasn't even fighting at the front. All that this guy was doing was running around between the trenches. And then later when he heard him at the speeches, we have to fight and this and that, he was like, oh, dude, you don't even know what fighting is about. So.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, hold on, I was trying to find the last, where is it? Who's the guy who died in like the 70s? Doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't matter. But if you look at the military, it's pretty gay. That's all I'm saying. Also, Tom Cruise in the Nazi outfit. Did you ever watch The Valkyrie?
Oh my God.
Have you ever seen this movie? Okay,
No.
So I find this movie really interesting. So there's a movie called The Valkyrie, and it's a Steven Spielberg movie about about the Nazis trying to kill Hitler. They're like, this is a very Trump, within like the 2020-2019 period, right before January 6th, like the inner rhinos who were trying to destroy his power kind of thing. Similar vibe. So they're saying, wow, Germany, what is so bad about Germany? And this movie's about this to Americans, and it's really fascinating because they're saying, look, Germany's not so bad. Austria's not so bad. We've got cool fashion. We look like Tom Cruise. Right, the music in the background and the sound effects even are like Americans talking to make you, because usually when you see Germans, you even have sound effects that make you afraid. They're like, oh wow, the way the Germans talk, they're creepy. right? You've got like
Ruff,
weird,
ruff.
yeah, like dog barks, whistle sounds, weird like spikes of like, you got iron wool just scratching in the background.
Sauerkraut.
It's weird. So here you got Tom Cruise, everyone's favorite, all right? You know, and he's all pretty, and he's gonna take out the only bad thing in Germany, right? Because it's not the nationalism, it's not the socialism. It's gonna be for Germany. He does it. It's gonna do for all the German people, and so he's gonna save Germany. But at the time, it's the Third Reich, so he's gonna save the Third Reich. So what is he really gonna do to save the Third Reich? What does he have to get rid of? Well, he's not getting rid of anything except for the Fuhrer. It's all about getting rid of Hitler. See, it's really just his fault. It's all just this one guy's fault. And if you wanted to, you could blame him for everything because the Germans and the Austrians, they weren't so bad. And I honestly, psychologically, my whole life kind of got myself to the point of thinking that way too. Now, granted, Germans aren't so bad. They're just as bad as anyone else. Americans perhaps are as bad or worse. Russians seem to be just as bad. Maybe that's the point, that there's evil on all sides and we should be not quantifying it, but qualifying it. But we shouldn't be pretending that there's a singular scapegoat we can use that will just wipe it all away. Because now
Well, of
you've turned
course.
Hitler into Jesus Christ.
You know, with the history on Austria, you know, I'm not supposed to comment on this, I guess. What I would propose, however, is the issue may be that you may very well have, you know, 1%, 2%, 5% psychopaths in any given society, probably even less, like real psychopaths, sociopaths. And then you have quite a few order followers or whatever that like to have it cozy and so on, and that are maybe a little bit evil or a little bit, you know, not so empathetic. You
I'm
just
just
need a few
randomly showing
percent.
Tom Cruise's face. Has nothing to do with what you're talking about.
You just need a few percent, you know, to run the party, to run the administration, the industrialists, and so on. Everyone else is disenfranchised, so all choice they have is work in the factory, or you can go to the front lines. And then 5 years later, anyhow, at least from the Second World War, what I understand, for Germany at least, most everyone was forced to be at the front lines. And what I also kind of found was
Eventually,
funny
yeah.
was there is a meme or something about like 1930s.
Although
and it
I
says,
would
"Oh, look."
I would nuance that by saying that they killed everyone until you became the front lines. You know what I mean?
Of course.
It's not
Yeah,
like
of
it was
course.
like it's not like they just had a big
Yes.
front line. Yeah, it wasn't their fault.
And anyhow, the meme said, yeah, oh, your choices in 1930s, you know, as a woman, you were so disenfranchised, you know, you can, you know, go cook or whatever. And then it put the man there and it said, well, what you can do is you can go to the front line, you know, and who had it better? I mean, no one really in war, but anyhow, it was interesting juxtaposition here. What I wanted to answer briefly, Huffin Bassist said this. He was asking about Dr. Shiva. Maybe you can comment, Huffin Bassist,
did,
on
didn't
what
we?
you mean.
We did have a Dr. Shiva interview, and then we set up a second one, but I don't think he was doing we just didn't finish. It didn't happen for some reason. I think he was busy or something. And then the
Correct.
election happened, so it was less important. But I'd still like to talk to him because there's
For
other
sure.
things than just the election to talk to him about. And especially now, we're going to be more interested in talking to people that want to be critical of the coming campaign and establishment. As much as like you can be for an establishment, you need to be critically analyzing every move they make. Right? I'm
And the thing is,
super enthusiastic that RFK wants to get fluoride out of the water. I'm going to study everything he does to make sure that's true.
well, exactly. That's the thing, because whether they are play pretending or not, whether there are other agendas in the background or not, and I agree, especially everyone who is now excited, hopefully for, you know, good reason or whatever, these are the ones who should be looking super closely and should be making sure that actually what they themselves imagined, let's say, would be implemented actually is being implemented to the T, and again, not let it up even to potential, and I was going to get into blasphemous territory, how do you call that, like light entities, like Bobby Kennedy may appear like, and they'd be like, really look at the fine print. Is he really doing it? Because if everyone is looking, it doesn't even matter.
I think it's a foregone conclusion that their light beings are associated with Nordic light beings are associated with the Trump campaign, right? Like that's kind of what Barron's 7 feet tall. Like just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
It's pretty clear what's happening.
Return of the Tartarians.
We're almost there. I wanted to post this. So this is true. Economically speaking, people are already, and companies are already preparing for this. So 3 days since Donald Trump's historic landslide, and already the EU is buying American natural gas to avoid Trump's tariffs. Inevitably, they see this coming in 3 months. You might as well start saving money now. Putin says he will sell Russian oil in the US dollars, which is I can't believe that's the second thing instead of the first thing. Like, that is the most important. That is the craziest. We need to look into this more, that Putin will be selling in US dollars. But it's not that he will only be doing this. It's just that now they'll be accumulating US dollars again. You understand how bad our economy was getting because we were isolating ourselves. We were about to have a Japanese Edo period. If it literally was about to happen. We were about to enter into the coldest Cold War since the Graham Hancock climate change. Okay, Hamas calls for peace. Well, they always call for peace, but will we listen this time? It's possible, because now we have someone who likes to make deals. Deals aren't always what you want to make with Hamas, but Hamas is calling for peace. Mexico broke up a migrant caravan heading for America. Nature is healing. I don't know. But what I wanted to show was, where did I put it? Here it is. Oh, yeah. Brian freaking Mormon Johnson. Maha, right? Hanging out with Bobby. And so that's kind of fun. And then then Keenan says, Maha in Mori translates to many. And I said, medical health
Maha is great.
But I like
Mahabharata.
And the medicinal health opposed to agony, mahogany. That's what's coming next, right? So I don't know, but we're probably talking about greatness. But the other thing I see is Krav Maga. I don't know why that isn't a bigger deal. But my thought, as soon as I heard MAGA, was, wait, the Israeli martial arts? America is practicing Krav Maga to protect Israel. That's what MAGA means. Let's be real.
Well, you said it.
Cool. Someone's got to do it, and we're the only ones who can do it right. America.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, you also had a list of things you wanted to cover today, right? Like, that's no joke. November 18th.
That's no joke, but let's see where we go first. Let's maybe, just because we're on the track, go to the politics and health first, and then see how far we get.
All right, down the rabbit hole we go.
Oh, in the 19 days.
Oh,
of
yeah,
course,
this was
cool as well.
This was pretty good. Vance's conversation.
Yeah,
about
I only listened in a little bit, but again, I have to say I was surprised that this JD Vance guy is surprisingly sympathetic. Is that a proper word to say?
Yeah.
Like, I had never heard him before, and I was like, oh, actually, this again. But this is the real everyone.
I wish he was Mormon. He just seems like we could really get him. You know what I mean? He would love it over here.
No, but what I want to say to everyone, I mean, consider this. I'm already saying, oh, someone seems sympathetic and great. I don't really know much of his policies or none of his background really to have any opinion on that.
His mom was like a crack whore in Appalachians, and then he ended up becoming a Marine. Then he went to Harvard or Yale. Was he Harvard? Yale.
But then to qualify, why do I think he's sympathetic? Because he's not, cackling, giggling, and obviously demonic like some of the other actors you have, and that's already putting you on the good side. But I'm saying this is not a good place to be in overall, if that's already a thing.
I mean, the fact that he's not a Harvard kid means he's not a Aldous Huxley beta. The fact that he's a Yale kid is the sign of the collapse of Yale, right? Back when Simpsons were making episodes saying, oh man, they're letting anyone into Yale now. This is who they were talking about. And he got in because of him being in the Marines. But he is actually pretty smart, I would say. He's pretty smart. He's smart in the way that magazine salesmen are smart. He's smart like a bank businessman. He's not the ultimate wisest kind of smart. He's not a wise person. I wouldn't say he's a wise person. But he's kind of maybe more wise than some, because he's lived through trauma. He's seen his mother addicted to drugs. He's seen how infrastructure is designed to entrap Americans and all people to keep them perpetually in debt, making a little bit of money off them every year for the rest of their lives. He didn't like that. And he's super into business, and he's into Yang, and he's married to a Hindu woman, so he's actually got a lot of metaphysical background that you would be surprised for an Appalachian boy to know as much about the Veda as this guy does, which I think is another reason he's actually part of the team. But I thought the most interesting part
the real question is now, is Dr. Shiva now going to get a cabinet position too?
No way. He could maybe do like I can see him as the new Nader, right? Like Nader in the United States was a really
Right. I briefly heard about them back then, that this guy appeared to be a thorn in the side of some individuals,
I
but I don't
love
know
I
how
love
real that
Nader.
was.
Oh, I don't know if he was much of a thorn, but I think I love Nader to an extent because he's like, look, dude, just it's not that big of a deal to not put lead in your freaking toys. That was a big thing to him. He's like, look, just have a iota of corporate social responsibility. Because your corporation, if you think about it, a person who is a complete psychopath and destroys their water supply for everyone around them for a generation. But if a person is a corporation and that corporation can live so much longer than the average person, then that person can cause so much more detriment to the environment. And if we're talking about capitalism as, the capacity to capitalize
It is
on
the living
resources.
dead, the corporation.
No. The capitalism, I meant it from a positive perspective. So a watering hole where a bunch of animals are showing up at the watering hole and they're able to make families, and you have lions and tigers and bears and zebra, oh my, because of the watering hole. If one individual destroys the watering hole, that destroys the capacity for all of these other individuals to capitalize. All of these elk and antelope, they can no longer be capitalists, right? That's the way to look at it. And so he's trying to protect capitalism. And this is the Green Party, right? This is the American Green Party. Your Green Party isn't as cool as. But our Green Party sucks now. But I'm just saying, in the 70s, when they were like trying to stop you from having fiberglass gas tanks that were exploding,
I mean,
wasn't
just
the worst
imagine
thing,
this,
right?
and just to briefly point this out to everyone again, and maybe when we have hopefully Martin Hipp on soon again, we can talk more about the German politics. But again, for everyone to understand this, the Green parties in Europe started as a super hardcore anti-war parties. And by now, they are the ones in the German government pushing for more weapons deliveries and whatever else. So it's amazing how much that
I
can
have
switch around.
a cynic take on the European Green parties, and really what it is it's the same neocon, neoliberal, corporatist elite like Nixon's vice president Rockefeller was really instrumental to the American Green Party. And in the creation of the Green Party, a big thing was, look, we need better legislation. We can't have corporations writing the legislation because they're benefiting themselves in the short term and not America in the long term. So we need long-term plans. And by building legislation, at first what they found was, okay, people will vote on our legislation. That's really useful because if there's no other legislation to vote on, 9 out of 10, they're going to just take our legislation and we'll change it slightly at the worst, but it'll probably get mostly across. But the problem with the Green Party was they could never get positions of power because the Democrats started noticing this. And so they started moving in. They're like, we're going to put socialists in Vermont. We're going to watchdog people. And we're going to simultaneously, the Republicans are going to have Goldwater, libertarians. So we'll have libertarian constitutionalists versus statist Democrats. And then that'll keep people out of the interest of a third party. And the Green Party could have been the third party, and it got really damn close. Nader was about 5% versus Gore and Bush. It was all coming into fruition, and they just stopped it. They did the Republicans and the Democrats, Bush and Gore, whose parents, by the way, have a company together called Occidental Petroleum. They worked together to stop the Green Party from getting the 5% that would have Occidental. But that's Al Gore Sr. and Herbert Walker Bush, their company. So what the Green Party realized in 2000 was, and at this time there are already efforts being made in Germany and in other countries, that the neoliberal elite hegemony was rebuilding its power in Germany, right? After the war. And they're like, well, East Germany, 1991, we can buy it on pennies on the dollar, most of these satellite companies and things that were being built there. So how are we going to control that? Let's build the Green Party there to just write legislation for the European Union. And a huge amount of what is the European Union was created by the Green Party and by essentially the same neoliberal elite from Rockefeller that had built the American Green Party. They started as the same thing, but they had way better luck in the last 10, 15 years in Europe in elections. Before that, they were just writing legislation, right?
Luck. Greta Thunberg. as one example, Greta Thunberg, but I can give you a real life example. So I have a friend who was working for a Green parliamentarian in the European Parliament. And aside from that particular parliamentarian only caring about, I don't know, flying around and not even able to, for themselves, buy a local tram ticket or something, we can talk about how useful that position is into itself. But anyhow, there to do anything is a struggle or whatever. However, when the same individual I know worked for Open Society Foundation related place, any and all legislation that they were developing was wholesale accepted by the parliament. So from that point of view, it's more effective to work for one of these non-profit, oh, I'm helping you write your legislation, Open Society Foundation constructs. You'll have more effect in the parliament potentially than actually working within the parliament.
Pay no attention to the democratic process, right? Like, because that's just it's the front door. You want to go around the back door. Yeah, pretty much.
Exactly, it's the front stage, so that people don't start rioting.
I think that's one of the things that we should consider Vance as a Dick Cheney figure in a good way, though. Like, he is a lot more on it. He is the youngest VP. There are pictures of him from like 10 years ago sleeping on couches. It's hilarious. But at the same time, he's open-minded in ways you wouldn't expect, like you just said. So Rogan brings up the MAPS Association, which, granted, Soros finances. And he tells him,
and
hey,
may be funding the Joe Rogan podcast ever since Matthew North spoke about it. Just again, FYI.
Well, let's, you know what? Hey, I would be a hypocrite if I were to fly to visit you and not be for open borders, right? Like, I'm for open borders for me. I definitely like them. I exploit them every time I get the chance.
Sure, but what are you tying that to now, to the open borders?
Well, I'm tying it open borders, open society, the idea that the individual has the capacity to go wherever they want to go.
Yeah, I can always put a nice label on whatever.
What about the idea that, you know, Thomas Jefferson said that you should be secure in your papers, persons, and whatever properties and herbs you put in your body, right? So the drugs thing, it's a Thomas Jeffersonian libertarian position that, and the idea also that really pushed it with Vance was veterans, right? Because veterans go through this crazy thing they don't see coming. They're 17 years old. They go to Iraq. They get a picture of their girlfriend having sex with their neighbor, and then they're just PTSD shot at for the next 2 years, right? It's pretty bad to be a soldier. And when you come home, you can't tell anybody because people think you're crazy already. If you try to explain how many people that you've seen die, like, it's not, how are you going to, you can't help yourself by explaining to other people your toxicity. So it's all pent up because you're told, hey, you have to hold this in so you can live day to day. And there's only so many solutions. All of a sudden, you're hearing about these dopamine, serotonin reuptake therapies where they have a therapist actually help you process your PTSD. And they're like, wow, I didn't really remember this, but my friend Steve had his head blown off in a Hummer. And I saw my friend burned alive in Baghdad. And I just kind of blocked it out, right? So those are the kinds of people that I think we should put to the front lines of protecting, and we should care more about, are the veterans. And apparently Vance does too. And the fact that he's open to this, because the next scare was, are the Christian right going to take the Republican Party the way the Democrats have been threatening? Clearly not.
Just before we continue, let me just say one thing. From what I understand, I'd all be for, caring for veterans and proper real medical assistance for everyone. That does not have to be too expensive, actually, if you do it right. And
of course,
if you bring back the naturopaths, which supposedly even ran America until 100 years ago. However, what I would be even more concerned about is simply not creating any more veterans.
I wonder about that. So on one hand, hard times make strong men, soft times make soft men, or men to become
girls. It's still humans fighting humans, and that's completely insane.
Yeah, but we're right now fighting. You and me just had a fight. Well, I have an opinion, you have an opinion. There's different ways of fighting.
But it's not making me lose a leg.
That's true, right. Although we do have our Robert Wiles, and I was just remembering that people without legs run faster, harder, stronger, and maybe the transhumans will just get rid of legs. But I think it's not the point. The point is that we can have arguments, we can have fights, and that we should train people to fight. Like, so the idea of the militia means assembly, peaceable assembly, right? So even the idea of the assembly of a violent and preparatory Rajastic military they're there to keep peace. So if everyone's able to keep peace, then, look at Japan, look at the Old West,
Sure,
you have
but
very
then still
civil
I wouldn't
people.
have any veterans because no conflicts would break out. Like we talked about, I talked with Natch about this, about the gun laws and so on. Yeah, if every second granny has a gun and so on, no one's gonna try pull anything crazy. If you
Yeah, but
have, the shotgun pointed at you at the same time.
Okay, so veteran, an old experienced soldier, old age that has been long in use, from Vetus, old age,
You want to
advanced in
pull this
years.
up?
Yeah, sure. Hold on. So it doesn't have to mean what it means. No word has to mean something bad.
Well, of course.
This is one of my strongest beliefs, that every word you think has a bad meaning, it's just a misuse of that meaning. Okay, veteran, old experienced soldier, from the French veteran, from Latin veteranus, old age that has long in use, especially of soldiers, a plural noun, old soldiers, from old age, advanced in years, from the Sanskrit vatsa, meaning year, etos, meaning, so having many years, really. So people that have, I feel like a veteran is almost the same as alumni. Let me look that up too. Alumni etymology. A pupil. So yeah, from alumnus to a veteran, essentially. So you go from school, graduate from school.
1860.
Yeah, true. A newer word.
1640s. Okay.
But from the Greek, from alumne, and yeah, it's pretty much becomes more popular than, yeah, see? So you would have replaced veteran with alumna for whatever reason. It seems like veteran's the way to go, because you're actually talking about someone who has experience. Experience is just having, an expert is just someone who's experienced something and having years of experience. So it doesn't mean that you necessarily like murdered people or that you had to fight in battle. War not make one great, said Yoda, right?
Yeah, I think that's great. But technically, right now in the US, is somebody considered a veteran who is not a combat veteran in that sense?
Yeah. A lot of people use the term veteran. They're like, oh, this is a heavyweight veteran of the wrestling league, or this is a kitchen veteran. He's been in the kitchen for
but I'm
decades.
referring this to legal benefits and so on. I know the
Correct.
military in all states cares for you to some extent, but I guess here it's also more about particular medical assistance,
social
usually
service.
due to combat experience, right?
But
Or combat
social
injuries.
service. Yeah, this is true that combat. I mean, I'm not saying stolen valor either, but I do think that we could train everyone and call them veterans without there being a world war, without a bunch of people dying. I don't think.
Yeah,
That's
no, sure. I
exactly...
agree. I'd prefer that. Yes.
Fair enough.
I'm with you.
Dark Shadows. Do you like the Moonies? I'm a fan. The Prince of Peace? Oh no, this is Abe Shinzo. Wow. Paging Dr. Freud. That is hilarious. Wait, am I wrong?
I thought you liked this. I can't explain this properly yet, but apparently there is a connection.
Okay, I was confused. I was like, wait, did I just think that Abe Shinzo was Moon Sun Myung? I was really confused for a second. I was like, no,
either that or they're the ones, or they're the ones like attacking him. But why did I just pulled this up because I somehow thought you would enjoy this. But
for those of you who don't know about the Moonies, I know I'm just such a... The Moonies are amazing, and they get such a bad rap. And I get it. I know they're a cult, and they steal your kids, and they melt down their jewelry, and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, what he did is he took a bunch of hippy-dippy 60s kids that would have otherwise not bred, and he forced them to get married and have tons of kids. And I know a bunch of these people. Like, I lived in New Mexico. I have a friend of mine, this redhead, 2 meter tall, a little bit taller than that, skinny guy, amazing. And he walks around with his hand behind his back with a Bible at dawn every morning, because that's what they taught him to do as a kid. It's like he's in a North Korean prison camp, but he's free now, right? It's incredible. And he's one of the coolest people. Like, he's a great guy, but he's just super duper disciplined. And his wife and him, it's like they don't like each other. You know what I mean? It's like a 1950s marriage. But they love each other because they got married when they were like 10. Like they were children, but they were told they were going to get together, and then they were in religious classes, and then they all got the marriage day where everyone got assigned at like 16. They got married, right? And they're happy. They're way happier together than they would be alone. They're in their, like, I think they're about 40 now, right? And they went through that period of thinking, wow, how crazy it is that I came from this crazy cult that was just believed all this crazy stuff. But then they got into our world, and I think they realized that crazy cult was not nearly as crazy as what normal people are taught in public schools, right? Okay. The Moonies. Plus, George Bush Sr. loved the guy, and George W. Bush actually gave him the award, the Prince of Peace, right? So I feel like that's worth something, right? You know about this?
Who gave him the title?
The King of Peace. George W. Bush crowned that picture of him earlier where you saw him a second ago. Hold on. Here in this picture.
Honestly, that kind of makes me worried for him, but okay.
Yeah, Bush crowned him the King of Peace, and the King of Peace in I think it was 2003 or something like that. Moonies, where did I find that? Unification, grasp of power. I forget, but basically Bush called him the Prince of Peace and gave him an award for bringing together all these people, but also because he gave so much money to the Bush campaign. I'm trying to find the picture of it, though. It was, like, incredible.
I think I agree with Jonathan. Moon was intelligent startup, but I'm not that deep into the story. But anyhow, it just seemed with Shinzo Abe, if I understood this correctly, someone who maybe was a Moon cultist then was assassinating him or something along those lines. But anyways, it just, came back to be relevant, or it was used again as some sort of asset, basically. That's what it was pointing out. But because it was a cult, I knew
it is here. 2004, crowned the king.
Love to talk about it.
Crowned the King of Peace in the Dirksen Senate Office Building in Washington, D.C., in front of at least a dozen members of Congress, all different denominations, U.S. ambassadors, gathered to honor Reverend Moon for his efforts in unifying the world religions and trying to establish a new United Nations dedicated to peace. In addition, several members of Congress received Ambassador for Peace, including Mark Dayton of Minnesota, Danny K. Davis of Illinois. I feel like there was I think Kerry also was there too. And yeah, ever since he was a VIP guest at Ronald Reagan's inauguration in 1981, Moon and his Unification Church have been permanent fixtures in Washington. They owned the Washington Times and UPI, right? There's a lot of things about them that are really fantastic. Also, the Moonies in Paraguay, I got to visit their little outpost, the Elysium place. Where is it at? Let me see the picture there. Paraguay. There we go. Yeah, they have the huge compounds, like giant, just miles and miles and miles of Paraguay, and it's next to the Bush property as well, which I find. So Nestle, Bush, and Moonies, right? They're on that level,
Yeah, which tells you something or not.
Well, I like them. So the Moonies, and then you've got the Bohemian Grove entrance.
Oh yeah, so this is just interesting.
Doing behind my house. Just kidding.
Yeah, anyone who wants a deeper HD look on this, apparently there is now footage from inside here. You can listen to the interview, make up your own mind as to how relevant this place really is or not. But it does exist, just as, for example, also the whole Epstein ranch exists, and also they have strange statutes and all these kind of ritual things. Yeah, we don't even need to dwell more on it, but since it's been so popular ever since Jones did this whole crashing in 2001, where people to this day still wonder how he managed to do it. But in any case, today
I feel like if you went up to the woods behind my house and, in the dark with a flashlight and you were recording my mom's fountain or something like that near the redwoods, it would look just about as creepy as this. That's the thing. The redwood trees, and if you're lost in the forest at night, we already have a predisposition to Blair Witch Project. But I mean, look at it. It's a pretty nice summer club. It's really all it is. Do they have sex at their summer club? Is there a summer club that doesn't have sex at it? What are you even saying with that? The main thing is that mostly women aren't allowed there, which means that there's a lot less heteronormative sex.
Although I heard what's funny, that they're allowed to work there, supposedly, which I would find incredibly funny if that's corred, because of state law, that there's equal employment
I had a
for
friend
genders anywhere or something like this.
I knew a girl who worked in the kitchen there a lot, and she's doing well with her life now. I've known a lot of people that have worked in the kitchen, but that doesn't mean that you get access to the rest of the camp. Let me see if I can show you a Bohemian Grove map real quick, which, I think this is pretty close to it. At the campfire circle. Oh, what a crap picture. Hold on a second. Not very clean imagery. But you can see there's like a road and then there's offshoots, right? And so you shouldn't go into other people's neighborhoods, essentially, if you're not invited. Very much like Burning Man. It's like your own zone, right? But
Oh yeah, sure.
there's a center point, and the center point near the auditorium, that's so far from the rest of it. There's the grill. And so at the grill, that's where people can work. Essentially, they're allowed to work right around here, but they're not. And I think maybe the store, but I don't recall if women work at the store. They think they could, but for the most part, those are the two zones where women are. And there was an interesting article recently, which was like Bohemian Grove let
Wait a second.
women in.
Why are no feminists complaining about this?
There are, feminist.
But not enough. It
There was
wasn't
a-
on mainstream news yet.
Well,
Which-
first off, there already was the all women secret society in Greenwich.
Of
in
course,
New
those
York.
exist. I'm just saying, just for the sake of it, and not.
So they're
not that it was really necessary.
It makes more sense to have women's witchcraft covens do their own thing. However, I wanted to find the article. There was an interesting article that was like, hey, we're
Wait.
women.
Are you implying now that all high-grade feminists already are in witchcraft covens, so they don't
You
even
can't say
care
all
about
of them.
being allowed
Not
to
on
enter the
TV. You
Bohemian
can't
Grove?
say that on TV. But with Bohemian Grove, what was it? There was an article a few years ago, and it was like, look, we all know what you're doing there, and we're not even shocked because we, like women, like to have covens and do witchcraft, and we have the same kinds of rituals and have forever. It's just weird that you don't want us to be a part of that. And it's an interesting point that she's making. It's like there's nothing at this point that you need to hide about this. However, this is written from a lesbian witch in California.
And all the
during
knowledge probably
Obama
originally
Biden-
stolen from women 50 years prior anyways, but that's another thing. Whatever
Maybe to an
ritual
extent.
knowledge and
I
so
think a
on.
lot of women had a lot of the special. There's a lot to be said about ransacked colonialism, where women were not interested in passing on to their as war brides the technology that they were holding for their people, right? And that's definitely something that we see. But men had powers too, and so a lot of these things, like the Bohemian Grove, is Irish Protestants, a lot of them, and some of the more occulted Irish Catholics. And so there's a lot of pagan mysticism and druidic magic that sort of, even though it's not saved per se, it is sort of mutated into Catholicism and into Irish culture in a way that's permeated. So that still.
And just as we're on the topic, can you briefly pull up my channel? Because we can briefly show David's most recent interview where he's talking about the whole
So
Irish.
She said, Horse Lover Fat says she worked through my entire high school years there. Did you? Nope. Do you say you could or could not work at the store? What's the deal with the store? Because as far as I could tell, I think that's the rule, right? Like you can work in the grill and serve the meat plate, but if you get to the store, I think that's like maybe women can work at the store because it's not that far, but I think that's like the distance that you're allowed to work. Tell me if I'm wrong. The creepy people don't stop coming. It's California. What do you want? You know what I mean? It's not like keep Santa Cruz weird. It's the vibe. Okay, what about the Parsis and the opium trade in China? Do you want to talk about opium?
Yeah, so anyone who's just briefly, because I mentioned this about the Irish thing, you can
Yes,
check
and
out
by the way, I
David's-
would throw the best Grove parties. Like, you guys haven't seen anything yet. I have all of the plays. I could do better. I'm just telling you. All right, go ahead. Parsis, opium in China.
Yes. No, so just briefly, here I put the link for David's interview. This one is only on my channel now, for now, with Irish and Celtic, let's say, coding in history, which also appears to be full of 19s. This does not, again, necessarily, then give a positive claim as to what really happened. It just shows that also with lots to do with the Druidic and supposedly Celtic ancient things, they're also coded full of 19s. So have to be, how should I say, re-verified again in terms of how ancient that really is, or what got obfuscated in what sense, all of that. All right, so now we can pull this up. Yeah, I just found this very interesting This is maybe another thing I don't really have a clue about.
Oh, did we
Yeah, I
talk about
think
we didn't even talk about the Moonies' influence in Japan. We probably could have.
right. This will be the next tie-in, I guess, after you know explained their backstory. But also, I don't actually know what their influence was. I just think either it was with Shinzo Abe directly or with his environment. They were somehow associated, and then of course makes it strange that he was
So-
supposedly assassinated, right?
Yeah, and so he died in 2012 when he was pretty old. But I mean, Abe, yeah, Abe was assassinated. But yeah,
Abe,
I
yeah.
think you can tie it to Aum Shinrikyo. I don't know for sure if this is fair, but you know what the Aum Shinrikyo cult, the levitating cult. So in Japan
not
in
sure.
1995, oh my God, this is one of my favorite. Like I'm a huge fan of cults. If that wasn't obvious about me. But one of the weirdest ones to me are like Japanese eco-terrorist cults. That you know what I mean? And where's the propaganda videos that they made? Okay, these guys made anime to convince you to join their cult, and it was so good.
Sweet.
And it would be like Aum Shinrikyo can meditate, and once upon a time he meditated, and he meditated very much like Mormonism. He meditated until eventually he left his body, and then he learned to float. And so he can shoot electricity, stack electricity from his hands, and he can just he can clean the darkness out of the world. And there's a lot of darkness, obviously, in the world ever since nuclear, and we have to get rid of all the nuclear technology. And if everyone just were to work together to we care bear, like in Japanese, not only can you save Japan by just meditating and folding your legs, but you can freaking fly. And so everyone, all you got to do is get together and live in these old little houses, clean out the rats and mold, and give all your money to Aum Shinrikyo, and you can learn to fly. That's literally, and they had all these people like in these classes sitting there trying to float straight up, and they're bouncing, just bounce. Maybe if you bounce a bunch, eventually you'll just start floating, guys. Just keep, and everyone's like, whoa, it's real. He eventually just never came back down. Aum Shinrikyo. Let's go blow up some trains. And then they brought anthrax to the trains. Yeah. It's a weird cult.
Definitely no government connections or anything like that, I'm sure.
Totally, right? Yeah. No, I mean, this is super, yeah, like ultimately one of the most sketch. Yeah, and especially because Japan was in such a optimistic mindset, and then there was this economic crisis. So this is essentially the response to the economic collapse of Japan, I think, in a lot of ways. They're like, all right, we're going to keep prices low and keep you living in... If you go to Japan today, you can buy food for the same price you could buy food in 1991. They just, like, stopped the prices from changing, like Diocletian Roman fascism. So it's really weird there. And a lot of people were freaking out, thinking, okay, technology is clearly destroying us, and we need to return to this pure environmental time. So we should destroy the trains and destroy the Japanese infrastructure. And I mean, that was kind of the response to Moonies, because the Moonies were like, we're going to build the New World Order, and we're going to have a bunch of families. And it's like more Moonies. A reason I sympathize with them is they're so like the Mormons, their obsession with family. You build a family, that's how you proliferate, and it's connected to like Shintoism, that your family will continue to take care of your shrine, and you'll exist longer as you're remembered. Like there's a lot to that. But okay, Aum Shinrikyo, and then Jeb Bush's brother, Russia Tunnel. No, we don't need that one. Okay, that was good. We did did you want to do health?
Let's see.
Earth shit?
Maybe first, just briefly, the 19 days, just because it also ties in with the whole politics thing. So this is a channel, I have to say, I find the main perspective pretty decent, Hurting Humanity channel. I also believe I had heard this guy many years ago already somehow, somewhere. And here I just pointed it out because they're literally saying, here they're like joking. I think this is this Alfred E. Smith, what's the name exactly? Alfred E. Smith Memorial Foundation dinner, which apparently, from what I could understand, is held by the Bishop of New York every year. And to me, very much appears to be one of the public-facing selection events, let's say, or where, however, political clout is being thrown around. I think it was a different dinner where Trump got roasted. That's like there's another type of name for it. But in any case, this one I just pulled up because David Jung Jr. keeps talking about the 19 coding. And I found it interesting that here you have this guy literally saying, oh, in 19 days, we will have civil war. And he was referring to the election and making a joke about it. And it's just always curious how they come up with those 19s.
Every
we also
time.
we had another one. I'll briefly scroll up in our chat. Of course, also what should be noted is the Surah 47 in the Quran is literally the Surah Muhammad. You know, make of this what you will. But this is now the 47th president, which I also find is a quite interesting connection. Okay, I'm still scrolling. Oh yeah, and also you have, I guess this was the event when RFK, who is now, I guess, in position to become health secretary or whatever else, or new FDA chief, or dismantling it. Apparently was it November 1st when RFK was officially announcing his support for Trump? Do you know? Because that's like the one thing I have pulled up here. So like so the rally is from November 1st, the one that I have here.
Yeah, so what I was thinking was a lot of this stuff probably started to happen around Yom Kippur. So like October 10th, 11th, 12th is probably when they were making most of these decisions. And
Okay, so which,
RFK
all I
too.
want to point out is RFK in the speech. This was the speech in Milwaukee on November 1st. And here maybe again, because I don't know if RFK was on stage with Trump before at a political campaign event. Do you know if he was before November 1st?
I can't remember.
That would only be a few days before the election. And basically
Yeah.
there he's saying, look, don't vote for me. I want you to vote for Trump because this and that. And also here it's just interesting that he mentions, here it says, I started my presidential campaign 19 months ago. So he's again pointing out it's 19. Doesn't need, you know, of course, and now I'm super wary of any 19 I'm picking up anywhere on the stage. But since David has shown such ample evidence, including for the presidency of Trump from 2016 to 2020.
August 23rd in Glendale, Arizona is the first time that they were together on stage. Anyway.
All right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he just suspended his campaign. That's right. So what which Jewish holiday is closest to August 23rd, 2024?
That's another way to put it.
Analyzing. The closest Jewish holiday is Tisha B'Av, which falls on August 12th. It's a day of mourning that commemorates the destruction of the first and second temples of Jerusalem. Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, seems about right.
Anyhow, we have the 19th, and there, what else do I have? Timothy M. Dolan. Where do I have him here? Oh yeah, right. Here I just
chaplain, cardinal. He's the cardinal of
right.
New York. He's the guy who chooses what happens in New York. Everyone gets upset when I say that. Like these Catholics don't like to know. I remember one time I talked the other day. I was talking about the Jesuits. I was like, yeah, I was raised. I kind of just off the coast. Like I was raised by Jesuits. Like I was raised Jesuit, and this Catholic dude's like, Jesuits not a denomination of Catholicism. And I just wanted to be like, that's so adorable. You know what I mean? It's not that. It's exactly the other way around. See, like Catholicism is a denomination of the Jesuits, like just sort of like Islam, you know, or Scientology, or anything else.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just put him here because he's the guy who's talking about this 19 days until the Civil War, and I just found that quite interesting.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of people don't like to talk about the blue and yellow in the Vatican.
Oh, you have a crescent moons, which this is his seal. Nice. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with Luce yet? Did you study Luce?
I don't think so.
So Luce is the new Catholic Church anime mascot. The Catholic Church just created this chibi.
They're not serious.
They are. And not only are they Sirius A, but they're Sirius Constellation B. And you can look in her eyes. There's so much symbolism
Rising
here.
sun.
Well, it's actually the Venus clamshells, right? So it's the Venus, Compostela, Santiago shell. If you look up the shell, right? the meaning of the scallop shell for if you cross France and Spain, I think there's even some of these in Austria and Germany, to walk across the Compostela towards Santiago, right? Where they say that the Knights Templar used magic to pull iron out of the sand and to build spaceships that floated off and sailed across the stars. That's why it's the road to Santiago of the stars, the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, right? So spaceships made of iron coming out of the dirt form together, and they sail off into the skies off the edge of the world. The edge of the world because it's like the flat Earth, right? And so that's the symbol. It's also a symbol of femininity for the Luci Chimbe.
Right.
But there was a guy. The guy who made it is artist. Hold on, let's see. Artist is like a. I'm so scared to even look this up because like he's created by Simone Legno. This is the dude. He just looks like he's from Eiffel 65. Deep down, dabby dabba, I'm a blue, abba di abba da. He's got that Euro Italo disco pop kind of vibe to him, and yet his art, like the fact that it's that deep, that it has that much symbolism, the green boots and the blood, right? Or it could be mud, but come on, it's very apocalyptic, right? Because it's in Revelation that they'll be up to their knees in blood from the Revelation from when they disappear. And also the staff, right? The Pope's staff, and the colors, because it's this yellow and blue. But that Pope's staff is actually Moses's staff that turns into a serpent, which is the seraph. So he or she, and that's another thing. This is almost assuredly a non-binary transgender character, right? A non-binary character is more accurate. Right, and then two aprons, two pockets that are the Masonic apron.
Yeah, and then the Holy See merges with the Worldwide Green Party and the Federalists.
Yeah,
and
red, white, and blue, and the rosary.
The Gaia non-binary.
It's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, it's Marilyn Manson levels of incredible. It's really good. Like, I mean,
pretty much.
It's really. I'm impressed. I'm impressed with the Catholic Church, and it's winning. It's lure for children. No, Lucifer for children. Luce. Right. That's the other thing that's funny about, like, what the heck do you think Luce, light, for the Catholic Church, Lucifer? It's amazing because Lucifer is an androgynous, most beautiful angel. So it tracks like a cassette tape. It's so good. All right. Sorry. Alfred E. Memorial Foundation dinner.
Yeah, as long as we don't bring it with this into association with Jesus, because I'm not sure if I had brought this up before, but one of my favorite German research channels called Trau keinem Promi, so trust no celebrity. I brought him up before. He's made this video, which since already got deleted from YouTube, where he's actually, I'll just put it as the question, like he's asking whether
Jesus
it
Lucifer?
could be. Yeah, pretty much. Exactly. And just looking really deep at the symbolism and all this, light thing, light here, light there. And again, I want to say, this is not about one's individual connection to love and whatever mask they may put on it, but it's about the symbolism. And I have to say by now, especially knowing, what the Jesuits have been up to generally, I wouldn't be surprised if there is something to it, at least in this strange symbolic, double.
Well,
I want to say double slit experiment, but
there's something to everything, but part of it is that there's no Lucifer, right? So there is a morning star and a bright morning star. There's Mercury and Venus is the fallen one, and is the fallen. All of this is where you're going, and that's totally. I'd like to go further into that direction, talking about the fallen being we're fallen, and how are we to be more like Christ if we're not fallen? Maybe we had to fall from grace because Christ had to fall from grace. There's a lot to that. But also, Lucifer isn't Lucifer. Lucifer's not Satan. Lucifer's not Samuel. Lucifer is the bright morning star. So when we talked earlier about the scapegoat ritual, Adam Krigler brought this up on Twitter. He said, on X, he said, "Is Kamala Harris a sacrificial lamb?" I was like, well, no, not a lamb. It's a scapegoat. Azazel is not a lamb, right? And so it's an important part of Yom Kippur, which
greatest of all time.
Let's remember, when is Yom Kippur? I just told you, October 12th, some odd days before the election, like you were saying, right? This is what I'm trying to insinuate, is Yom Kippur actually is when most of the things that happened were really fully decided before the election, right? It was probably around October 12th. And in the Azazel scapegoat ritual, you cast lots, these dice roll, and then you either sacrifice one or the other, and you spare the one that you don't sacrifice. It's a scapegoat ritual, and this is part of the sacrificial atonement thing. One gets to live and one gets to die. This is represented by Christ and his brother, right? The Mormon thing there is to say that there's the Lucifer, which is the morning star, and then there's the bright morning star. And by that logic, then yes, not only does that mean that Lucifer is Mercury and Christ is Venus, Phosphore, but that would say then that the fallen and the morning star are connected to, like, the idea of Isaiah saying that Christ fell is so that we could rise again, rise above, escape this sort of Death Eater thing. Because what are we other than food for the gods, right? And so if we can escape that fate, yeah. Some people don't like that though. That's pretty close to. That's probably what a lot of satanic occultists believe.
Yeah, the only question I'm asking is to what extent they themselves are perpetuating the death-eating behavior. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's the.
But then again, then this excuse comes in. What is it like? Purification through evil, and all of that, which I'm not exactly sure how much that ultimately really checks out. But yes,
Yeah,
people have strange belief systems.
I like it. I like where we're going with that. We'll have to spend a lot more time on that one at some point.
A lot, because I'm like, who are the last ones you can upset? Well, maybe just baseline decent Christians.
There's very few people left anymore that can actually that can't stomach offense. It's true, but there are some.
Whereas I can say, I recently just briefly had a conversation with a priest, a Catholic priest of no particular order. And he was like in a hospital where I was visiting someone, and he like coming there to, I guess, talk to people like twice a week before they die or something like this.
Yep.
And it was just funny because I just briefly asked him like, okay, so what's the exact Christian concept now? What's going on? And like, is there life before it? And the way he put it to me, and this is just, I guess, regular baseline Catholic lore. And it was just funny, to ask someone like this, like pretend I have no clue, but in a sense, by now, I'm not even really sure if I do have any clue. But anyways, it says no life before this. Then you have this life. And then after this life, you have the actual eternal life in heaven with God, more or less. But then also, when my friend brought up the idea of Jesus, because apparently also some Jesuit had been visiting, and all the Jesuit was talking about was Jesus. And then the Catholic priest also said, well, Jesus, of course, also is very important, And then, of course, I didn't go further to pin him down. It was like, oh, did he now die on the cross or not? Like what about Jesus Barabbas or whatever? We then more talked about health and
well, you remember that
oxygenation
whole thing
of the cell and so on.
Did we talk about the whole thing with Barabbas means son of God?
Please, let's bring it up again.
Well, just that point. Abba is father, right? And Bar Abba means son of father. So it's the son of God. So they're saying, bring us the son of God. Bring us the son of God. Bring us Barabbas. And I mean, take that how you will. Either that means that they knew what they were saying, they were mocking him, or that there was something lost in translation because they believed that this guy Jesus was their son of God, even though he's saying he's the son of man and Emmanuel and all this other stuff. They might have been confusing him with the term Barabbas. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing in terms of the scapegoat ritual. Because on one hand, then what you're saying is you've got a guy who is this ultimate sinner who is forgiven, who is the scapegoat, or is the freed goat, and then the Azazel goat, and then the scapegoat becomes Christ, right? And that is the whole point of the Deuteronomist atonement, Talmudic Christ sacrifice. Because before that, Christ is just like, let's have a jubilee. It's too insane how much debt there is. Let's just wipe the debts away. And instead, they're like, can't do that. Let's kill God, and then use that as a metaphor for the atonement of all, because God is past, present, and future, so that will atone for all past, present, and future debts. And I mean, it's
and I'm sure certain people believe that and use that to perfectly justify any evil and crazy behavior they put on, because it's already been atoned, past, present, and future, thanks to whoever's sacrifice.
I mean, you have to already be a legalistic thinker to think that way. And I think that's the point, is that they had to impress. And this is why it's so interesting when they say evangelize Christianity, because there's a natural, intuitive, logical way to live your life that seems much closer to what Christ was teaching than this really complicated thing that they have to teach people how to teach others, which is this unnatural belief structure. And so that alone should tell you, hey, that's maybe not Christianity, because Christ was trying to get rid of that from the Deuteronomists and the Sadducees to begin with. So if that's still there, then at least there's something kind of off, right? And if that's all there is, then what the freak?
Yeah, I have to say, it almost seems to me by now that the stories have been, changed and adapted and propagandized so many times that it may well be that within many of these stories we have remnants of all kinds of different psyops going on at different times or simultaneously, and that may be another reason why some of the stories seem exceedingly convoluted. And the best thing is, of course, allow for 1,000 different perspectives. So then you can always claim, oh, it's in the scripture because I interpret it in this way.
And so
But
this
yes.
is also, I like you, Joe, but I don't know. This is a very dangerous Calvinistic line of thinking. God is in control of everything. Submission to the concept is the basis for the Bible believing Christians. Well, I would like to say that my religion isn't based on your Bible, but your Bible is based on my religion. And that most of these beliefs are kind of dangerous. Like, if you're taking away your free will concept, then what you're saying is that you're basically cuckolded by God's fantasy, that you're living inside of this atomic bombarded consequentialist reality where you have no free will. You have this emotional illusion of free will. And that's cool if you want to use that to destroy existentialism. You don't want to be obsessed with, taking chocolate, ice cream, and drugs. But it's also uncool because you're making excuses for the Holocaust or for war or for rapists or for, you know what I mean? Because that's God's will, right? Like, that's just God's in control of everything. God's not. I mean, God is in control in the sense that God has the authority, but this is that idea of omnipotence. If God's so powerful that God can create a stone that even God cannot move, right? Because that's by nature of what a God is, so powerful they can do anything. But then the paradox of being able to do something that even they cannot do. So if you make the universe, let's call it not just one rock, but all of the rocks, the celestial mechanistic reality that is created, and of that, part of the rule is that there is entropy, free will, space, I and thou separate dynamicism, that causes God to pull themselves out of the system. God has to be outside of that system to an extent in order to allow that system to run itself. So there is, on one hand, the capacity for God to change God's mind, but God's already so aware that this is clearly a full and established thought. All of reality is a full and established thought that's happening, right? From the beginning to the end, God is thinking that thought through. And we are the thought happening. But we still have to have a certain amount of control, or else there would be no point. We would not be a thought. We would not be a real reflective experience. And this is the pure problem with Calvinism. Okay, underfunded Klutz is saying it's pure speculation, but I'd like to examine that a little bit more, because I'm speculating based on the existence of our reality. So our reality is something where either you're making decisions or you're just experiencing what's happening to you. What do you feel is really happening? Is that completely speculatory, or is that actually testable? Can you make decisions? Can you do things?
I mean, to this point, even here, I believe we can look this up what the current state is, but some neuroscientists at some point said, well, even before you yourself are aware of a decision, it appears there is already some mechanism within your brain, measurable or whatever, where it appears you've already made a decision. And then you could ask, how conscious are you really of the decision? However, then what we could add in, if there are added layers of etheric entity that we are, and that there are many hints at this, that there are various fields or higher layers of ourselves potentially, then I could also well imagine that just the next layer up is giving myself a message, and even before I'm aware of it here, it's already showing within the system. But at least for me, this would not necessarily remove the free will, because how do I know that the strongest voice within myself or intuition is not also some aspect of a quote unquote free will or something along those lines, something individualized? But yeah, I think it's a good point, and it's important to consider, just like you said, because if everything is utterly determined by an omnipotent force outside of yourself, then you would technically not be responsible for anything, which maybe even just practically may not be the best way to go about things. But
Yeah, I mean, so Joe, I'm not saying you're a Calvinist, but maybe at some point we should talk a bit about like what you are or what you believe. You're totally welcome in Discord, and like we could chat more about this. But I do think it's really an interesting thing, because the people who convince me that free will exists are atheists, trying to tell me that it doesn't. And so by just listening for hours to atheists try to prove that free will cannot exist, it led me to the belief that we cannot have started with nothingness that becomes a big bang, leading to more phenomenological diversity. It's more likely that we started with infinite potential, which is that ordered godlike state, and beyond that we could speculate, but infinite ordered potential that permitted limits, right? Like death and self. And from those limits, more phenomenological diversity happens, right? It's not that we start with nothing and we get more. It's that we start with everything and we get more, because infinity continues to expand. Well, that's fun. Okay. What about the
yes,
resets? No, we don't get whatever.
yeah, I mean, we can put out together, the best panel we get and try to hash these things out at some point. I believe you have had, I mean, at least atheists on, I believe,
Yeah.
and so on. And you had discussions on this. Maybe at some point, I can
Yeah,
join as
Seth
well.
is convinced that
Let's see
free will
if we
doesn't
can get
exist.
anywhere.
Seth Garrett was raised Mormon and did exorcisms and everything else like that. Was super spiritual guy, and now he's an atheist completely. And he's convinced that free will doesn't exist, and he's trying to explain how we would have these illusions or feelings for it. But because of quantum field wave theory, the idea of infinite potential also outweighs, to me, the idea that you're stuck in a paradigm.
Well, we
And
have all
yeah,
of these considerations, but also just
non-causality.
from a practical point of view, like you said, would there really be a point to it for whatever entity or process or even nature or efficiency? Still, energy follows along the path of least resistance. There are patterns and all of that. Would it make sense to initialize all of these billions upon billions of entities as humans, as an example, and then merely give them the illusion of free will, but simply have them as a passenger seat thing and like force them to go through this without having any sway over the action?
Yeah, it's an
Does
expensive
it
use
does
of
it
energy to
does it
force
really
something.
seem necessary to do that, and not just do that, let's say, how should I say, to then initialize these ego consciousnesses for all of them, and they believe they have some sway, but they really have zero at all? I'm not sure if that would make
It's more
sense.
and more energy usage. Yeah, again with entropy. Like these are the least logical ways of doing what is trying to get energy to go follow the path of least resistance back to the source, right? So you have this exchange of energy, and then it has a very clever way of finding itself back to the source and organizing. And that's the interesting thing about reality, is reality organizes. Like you can look at not just humans organizing, not just cells organizing, not just rocks, but yeah, rocks is actually probably start with geology. Look at geodes, crystals. It's not just
Look at the
sand.
Heartstones.
It's not, well, yeah, that's great. Not just sand though that's organizing together. It's diamonds. The fact that diamonds happen is incredible. It's not the other way around. So things are moving towards complexity, from complexity into order, and order is from pure potential energy into ordered mass, perfection of symmetry, of perfection of order, right? So like building a cathedral or something, like as opposed to building a small box. And we can see it's just carbon, but carbon can be organized better and better and better. So atoms socialize, and probably atoms are socializing because energy is social, and energy is probably social because it is God. It's the breath. It's that original all-knowing,
Because
or
ultimately
all-order.
everything is love.
Well,
Hopefully.
that's what you got to say until you don't get shot, right? You just say everything is love, and then they're like, all right, he's a hippie.
Well, we can talk about the technical understandings of what that exactly means. But if you, what was your last word? They're social. I mean, come
Yeah,
on, you're
it's true.
at the edge.
I see where we're going there. This is a pretty picture. I just wanted to say. This reminds me of like 1998. I'm sitting in my classroom. They put on some video toaster educational lesson, and it would show this kind of stuff.
So here, I know there's also all kinds of potential drama and whatever else people are saying surrounding this, but that's not what I'm about here. What I'd like you to do is pull up a 6 minutes, 40 seconds. Ideally, this one with audio if we can for just a minute, unless that's too much of a struggle.
I can do it.
Thank you so much. See, Andreas is
He's
faster than AI.
donating heavily to the
Oh, yeah.
church.
Okay.
Everyone waiting on the coming of a terrible flood. A famous mathematician, everyone had received the news that he was famous. Most people didn't know him at the time until the year of the prediction. But he had based his calculations were based off astrology. A conjunction of planets in the constellation Pisces, the fish, which, has associations to the flood. He predicted there would become a devastating flood because of these optics in the sky. Europeans even went as far as building arks, each one believing that they were the next Noah of the New World. Curiously, this mathematician was a Vatican astrologer. Let that sink in. False narratives, false flags, false histories. I get so tired of it, man. So many people ask me questions and send me emails, and they're buying into these things. They're asking me what my opinion is, and I really can't give an opinion because I can't prove a negative. There's so many theories across the Facebook spectrum. I can't even address them because there's no evidence to address.
So now this is the point.
You show me beautiful pictures. You show me all this
What's
phenomena.
coming now?
There's nothing behind. There's nothing for me to research, to delve into. I have only one single post on my Facebook Archaics group about flamenco because there's nothing to it. About the missing 1,000 years
my God,
of history.
really, bro?
It's not true.
Man,
Let it roll for 30 more
These
seconds.
are what the media provoke. People pay money to be deceived. I'm often asked how it is possible that the Archaics data of Phoenix has not received attention.
Okay, right.
But the answer, it's clear.
more.
Okay, so that's his. No. I just wanted to point out that here he's not qualifying his statement with anything. And now at the same time, please pull up the next video and then we can talk about it because it's from the same channel.
What?
We're making a, how do you call it, a story here? Not really, but this is interesting at the same point because here at the same time, he's basically saying, I don't know why he held back on this for apparently, I don't know, 3 years.
Year on the 138
We don't need to listen to it in this case, but he's basically saying,
Phoenix was the ancient symbol of resets, of the close and the sudden rise of new peoples.
okay, we can pause it. So I didn't listen to this whole thing yet. I actually should and I will. But it's strange to me that somehow for, I don't know, 5 years now, he kind of held back on the Tartaria topic or naming it. Of course, there's always the issue if a thing becomes popular, then people say, oh, if you use that term, then it's stupid or silly because there's so many AI pictures and all of that. But still, it's the most generic term we have currently, I would say.
Well,
or
I
call
guess
it.
I like Turan. I think that it almost is necessary to, because it sucks. I didn't think it at first when Dugan was saying it, but we've gotten to a point where I was like, great. So now that you've admitted it, we can start talking about Tartaria more. But the problem, like you just said, is so many people are making YouTube videos about nothing. I mean, there are people that are doing great things, but there are also so many videos about nothing that the term has lost its...
Yes, but I want to point out on the other hand is still it's a somewhat relevant, research or just connective term. We can always come up with new things, but then who will be able to even search for it except the people already knowing about
Tartaria,
it? So
we're keeping Tartaria. We're keeping it.
That's what I would suggest for now, at least. But anyways, I just want to point out that it's strange. On the one hand, he's wholesale dismissing flamenco because we did maybe with Nach or something a talk, and someone said, "Oh, someone completely destroyed flamenco's work," and I was like, "Who? Oh, it's Archaics." And then it was like, "Please send a video link." And then he sent the video link, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, "Well, maybe there's more in the video. I didn't watch the whole of it."
Americans can't read, and they don't like it.
No, it's okay, but then get an audio book or listen to these interviews. That's why I'm pointing out Serge's Bello Baba's channels every time with the Anatoly Fomenko translations for English. Now I put one up in German. These things are available, and you can still say it makes no sense. I'm completely okay with that, but just bring some proper arguments, and not the idea that, oh, Fomenko wasn't a historian. Why is he talking about history? I mean, I'm sorry,
Seriously,
but for
everybody,
me
go
that
to if you're gonna talk
disqualifies
about
the criticism.
Fomenko, go to
Exactly. Thank you.
Sergey Belobaba's channel, Belobaba. Go to Belobaba, and then you can click on his interviews. He's got actually some other things that are not even they're connected, but they're not always Fomenko. They're really important to watch as well. But I think if you're gonna even be like using his name Fomenko, you ought to see him talk. And I don't believe that Archaics has done that. I'm not saying he hasn't for sure. Maybe I'm wrong,
But
but
then
he
I'm
didn't
like,
bring it
what
up.
is this? And I'll just put it like this now as a European. What American hubris, salesman technique is this or whatever, that I'm wholesale dismissing the work of over 50 years of a professor and all of
Well, if
that,
you've got this
of
is a big common thing. You have
mathematics, which would be
when
something simple, at least to tentatively
50-year-old
verify
dudes
whether
have
he
their
can
narrative. Once you're
add or
50
not.
and you've read a couple books in America, you're done. I guess you're like, I have a thought. This is what I believe. It's no longer even. It's actually become a religion. That's it. I believe this. I'm going to teach other people that believe. And if anyone tries to convert me to believe something else, I'm going to freak out like you're a crusader from another religion, right? That's where it gets really fast. And I one thing I saw recently, I mean not that recently, but keeping topical, particle fever. So I have a friend that I've brought up a few times, Dr. Nima Hamed, right? Or Nima Khan Hamed, and he was in Particle Fever, which is a really interesting documentary, very normie, like Midwestern. You could show a teacher at a public school this documentary and then you won't get in trouble. They're not going to take you away and put a tinfoil hat on you for showing them this documentary. But the point of the documentary was not what happened. It's just that's how it works. Originally, they had a bunch of weirdos. They had a bunch of really normal philosophers and physicists, really, really good physicists who were getting their PhDs. Okay, and they were all the kinds of PhDs that you expected to succeed. And then you had the weirdo, the singular weirdo, my buddy, Dr. Nima Arkani Hamed, an Iranian kid who loves Dungeons and Dragons and physics. And he was
Just
saying
if you want to
things,
show something, you have to switch the tab, just so you know, if you're showing something.
Oh, bummer. Thanks for showing me that. Thanks, bro. Okay. Well,
Although the image was nice, but yes.
We'll go back a bit. Okay, so there's a documentary. It's called Particle Fever. Particle Fever. You could show it to anybody, and they'd think you were a normal person that just believed the world was round, and you were just a normal person. It's a normal documentary. And in the documentary, they interview all of these normal physicists that work for CERN, and they're like basic beesies, the normie kind of people that you assume are the people that this is about. And then there's a couple weirdos just to show how weird they are, right? And they included my friend, Dr. Nima Arkani Hamed, who is like an Indo-Iranian kid who liked to play Dungeons and Dragons, but also discovered the Higgs boson, predicted the Higgs boson particle 10 years before CERN experiments could prove it. And now they're just like, all right, go kid, go. What do you need? What money can we give you? What experiments can we run to prove that time isn't real? But at the time, when this documentary came out, they were showing how there's a dozen physicists, PhDs at once that were all going for their papers, and they assumed that only one of them could possibly be right about their physics theory. And all of them were wrong except for Nima. That's, of course, the point of the documentary. But it wasn't the plan by any stretch of the imagination. Originally, the plan was to show, yeah, there are even crazy people that think these things, but that realistically they're wrong, proven wrong by science, and that we have these great people that can show you the alternative truth that is the democratic, mainstream, accepted legacy truth, right? That's not what happened in the documentary by any stretch of the imagination. And I think I forget why we brought that up. What was the point? Oh yeah, because there's all of these guys who are trying to say in this documentary that they're correct. Their hypothesis is correct. And what they'll say about each other is basically the other person's crazy. The other person has no data. There's no reason for me to read that person's thesis. Why would I waste my time? I'm in the middle of a very serious experiment that I believe in. Why would I give any effort to to checking out that person? And that is what you're taught to do. Because realistically, it's not his job to learn about things that are true. It's his job to pursue things that interest him, Archaics is. And then we're supposed to be entertained by the things that interest him. If it were different, then he would
Depends, of
be.
course, on the standard or role that you put upon whatever you see on screen, or whatever individuals portray themselves as. I
I'm
haven't
coming
watched
from
him that much
CNN.
to
I'm
be
just
able to
saying,
say
it's all entertainment.
let everybody know.
But yeah, no, I think it's cool that people try, but also that lowers your. The more you pursue truth and the less you try to just patronize people, the lower your ratings and view count will be. Right? I think a big thing
So
about
come
shows like
again,
that,
patronize, and what else? The
if
less
you
or the more you?
the more you patronize people, the more your ratings will increase. The more you
Okay,
focus,
yes,
the
say
more
that
you
again.
focus
Okay.
on truth, the more you focus on truth, the less your ratings
Thanks
will
for pointing
increase.
that out. I
Will
agree.
decrease, right? So, I mean, if you're like, wow, you know what? You're so smart. In fact, other people have told you you're not smart because they're stupid. You're so smart and you're pretty. You know, that's and you're like, hey, think about me. I'm saying I'm smart and you're at least as smart as me. Right? And so therefore this is exactly what I see in so many YouTube channels. It's like, yeah, man, don't you get the people are all against you. I get that. I'm with you. Check this out. You want to believe this, right? It's true. How is
Man,
that different than the mainstream media?
Good point. Good point. Yeah, as they say, the most quote unquote dangerous individuals are those that are eloquent and well spoken and can put up a good show. Because by now it is exemplified. Let's just say we take the US elections or whatever, you can sell
Take my
individuals
election.
anything.
My election, please take it.
If you put enough spotlights on it and make a good show. So
Right? Yeah. Pretty good. So Fomenko, please guys, do watch his actual videos. You could literally watch Fomenko explaining the new chronology himself. Make your own decisions. We've been saying this for a while. Okay. And then also, why were the first Afrikaans written in Arabic letters? What do you want to teach us about Swahili?
So here, the only thing, this was posted in my chat. I'm only pointing this out to point it out. I have nothing to say about this because I have no clue. But it's just an interesting tidbit.
Well, because the people there spoke Afrikaans, but they were only learning to do that after they were already part of the Songhai Empire, as far as I know. I haven't watched this video, but I imagine that's what they're going to say. They're going to say it's like the Songhai Empire thing. Also, what's the word, Arabic word for non-believer? A kafir, yeah. So if you've ever called a kafir, which means non-believer, that's like dude in or like stranger in Afrikaans, which is interesting. There's a lot of terms like that where like, hey, what's up? Hey, what's up, kafir? Which is like, hey, what's up, non-believer? And you're like, whoa, bro, that's wildly based. And they're like, they don't. It's like, okay.
Oh yeah. So let's see. We have a few more minutes. Maybe let's go to health if you want, because that's another short section.
All right. Let's see here. FDA approved gene therapies. I saw that a while ago. That was exciting. And Clonade we're going to end with. Cool. So the FDA approves the first gene therapy to treat patients with sickle cell disease. This happened last year. Sickle cell disease is a condition that evolved in Africa or in African people because of malaria. The way malaria works is that it attaches to the blood cell. It loops into the iron molecule, and the blood cell actually it broke. So it looks like a sickle instead of a circle. Instead of a circle cell, it's a sickle cell. And that way, if a hook tries to hook onto the cell, well, because it's not a perfect circle, it breaks and it comes right through. So there's a lot of benefits evolutionarily to sickle cell anemia for surviving malaria, but generally lowers your life expectancy, makes it impossible for you to play nicely with Eurocentric medicines, and there's reasons why it would help to have gene therapies based on CRISPR that instead of instead of making you a different gender, actually extend your lifespan. All right, that's the idea here. Pretty cool.
If it works as clean and smooth as proposed. I honestly don't know enough about this particular disease to talk more about it. my intuition tells me there's 100 million ways that you can achieve this without gene therapy just as well.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
I thought you
well,
would like it. So
it depends on what you mean by that. So, like, you could literally eugenics program people that have deafness, and then there'd be no more deafness, right? That's what California eugenics program did. And this is what people talk about with sickle cell anemia. They're like, well, we could just make sure that babies aren't born with. I'm not a big fan of that kind of.
are you not telling me there wouldn't be simply like a diet supplemental or other things that you could do to
This is literally
alleviate whatever
look at
effects there may be that
look
are
at the
negative?
look at the genetic
Look at the graph. Look at the
shape.
CGI. Yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, but you should, because look at the difference between a blood cell and a sickle cell. Like, they're not the same, and there's a genetic change, and maybe we should consider the benefits here more. I mean, granted, there are less. We can see that people are living shorter lives because of it, but we could probably kind of come with gene therapies that help people with sickle cell anemia live just as long as regular people without changing their sickle cells. We have to really decide these things, though. Do people think sickle cell is an evolutionary step?
Can
with
we
the
get a
transhumanists?
can we get a referral link for these like super expensive treatments and so on, so we get some funding since you're
Okay. Well, the other thing that I'm really
kind of missing that.
the other reason I'm super excited about it is because
Get your gene therapy here, 10% off, code Exertus.
I feel like if you just tell people my name, hopefully that helps. Let's find out. But
You think the
FDA
doctor's really gonna send you a check? Unfortunately, I don't.
maybe not the doctors, but some of these
I'm not so
gene
naive to
labs.
trust that.
Some of these gene labs might be
Once your
closer
name really
shot.
gets around, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah.
FDA approves first gene therapy. This is first therapy because the last one was an illegal therapy done to stop a child from having HIV, right? Gene therapy, China.
Please, are
HIV.
you still really saying that? That's a bit of a trigger topic for me, but go on.
Yeah. So in
You're
China,
gonna splice it to prevent HIV. That's the
so there was a baby that was
amazing.
born to a woman. The mother had HIV, and in order to guarantee that HIV did not pass its way to the child, the scientists used a gene editing stem cell to treat the HIV with mixed success, right? And essentially, they have arrested the first scientist. Let me see. China jails. There you go. China jails gene edited baby scientist for 3 years because he did not follow the appropriate procedure and protocol to do this. But we can go back further. You can be like gene therapy.
Can you please
ban.
briefly put up the link I posted in the private chat?
Sure, one
Because
second.
this would be a longer expose now, which maybe we can do at some point. I'm not sure how banned or not banned the topic is.
Well,
I mean,
just
she can talk about it.
really quickly also. So
Yes.
re-examining the ethics of the human genomic mutations after the Wake scandal in 2018 and 2006, because there was also a scientist in 2006 who was working on gene therapies illegally as well. So basically what happened was they prohibited it 20 years ago. People weren't allowed to do it except for the elite in secret labs on islands run by the Epsteins. Other than them, it wasn't legal. So for most people, we're like literally a generation behind super soldier babies. There are hundreds of thousands of super soldier babies, maybe millions of people that are genetically modified that we just don't have the data on at this point, right? And they're looking now at saying, okay, we're going to start opening that up, making it possible. And the first thing we're going to tell you about is sickle cell, because who's going to get upset at that, right? We're going to try to transhumanize the Africans who were dying of malaria. And ironically, to me, what's weird about that is sickle cell is already the most recent evolutionary transhumanist thing to happen. Humans evolving to deal with malaria is a recent thing. So this already is a sign of genetic modification, even if we're talking about natural evolutionary mutations, right? So I don't know. We got to think about anemia differently. So here's the video you want me to pull up.
Yeah, so what I'm 100% sure of is there's different ways to deal with malaria, but just because you please pull it up and just leave it at the cover, or you can show the lady.
It's not about it's that humans mutated to
No, I
have
understand
sickle cell,
that, and that's interesting in and of itself. I'm 100% agree with that. I'm just not sure if more gene therapy really is the best for all concerned in this case.
Probably.
This I just wanted to point out because you mentioned another example, and here I could pounce on it more because I have a bit more background knowledge on it. If you're saying that one of the reasons for gene therapy initially also was to prevent HIV transmission, as you just showed, in this case, from a mother to a child, I will not go through the entire story now, and I'm sure I brought this up before on some extent on Neuropa. I cannot recommend highly enough to listen to this lady. She has an amazing book, which hopefully is available somewhere, somehow, but you should be able to get the basic gist of the information here or find summaries online. She's basically explaining how big pharma and opioid trade, or however you want to call it, money laundering and all of that economically ties together with the whole HIV story and how it was presented. And she's both giving the basic outline in terms of how it fit together economically, and also giving the basic explanation of what actually happens medically, because she's also a doctor and she can explain that. Ultimately, it's really quite simple. And she also explains why there were certain outbreaks, how it got labeled as that which it was labeled after. That also, I believe it was Gallo, was fudging around for 5 years already, trying to kind of model a new virus. And then serendipitously, in whenever it was in the 80s or something, this thing happened. But this initial outbreak, even most of the individuals initially affected by this had something called Kaposi sarcoma, I believe. So already a particular condition. The immune systems were heavily weakened and all of that. And then it was just very convenient, instead of saying like, oh, maybe, reconsider your lifestyle. There's many more factors which are explained in great detail in the book. But instead of referring to lifestyle or diet or potential drug abuse, they just said, oh, don't worry, you just have this new thing now, and we can get a whole lot of funding and all of that. And ever since then, the gravy train never really stopped, even though you had strong critics of it, at least already in the 90s and going on ever since. But still, it's one of the common tropes, just like with cancer, which people like to throw around without understanding anything in the background, and then pretending something is a completely impossibly to cure or even alleviate negative condition you're bound to stay with for your whole life, which I consider ridiculous. So I hope I said this in a way without offending anybody, but
Yeah, people aren't supposed to say CIA/AIDS, but I get the feeling when you look at the discredited HIV origin stories, looking at reverse engineered smallpox vaccines, it goes back even further, even involving the British and the French, and probably the former Third Reich's biochemical warfare department, which may have been the reverse engineering of medical technologies not originally intended to hurt people, but that they were working on cures, right? Because there's so many different labs. And this isn't, though, immediate. Like, first you see this go through the Soviet Union. And so the idea that the Soviet Union and the British and the French were working together, is there some really wildly deeper conspiracy about the creation of a disease that spreads through sexual transmission, released in target zones where the most resources in the planet are, right? Where resources we need for the coming industrial technological revolution of the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 2000s. Cobalt, nickel, copper, the silicon, everything. It's right. It's all coming from these places where AIDS is the number one killing machine and just sort of emerged, right? It's kind of weird. It's a weird thing.
just as we're on the topic of diseases, of course, this is a story that is completely unsubstantiated and complete
The whole
fantasy.
time I had been saying that, I meant to have this creepy picture
Oh,
of
nice.
Luc Montagnier.
Yes,
Sorry.
who at the very end he got exiled to Beijing because he was reconsidering some of the things he was involved with
Yeah.
regarding HIV. So
I
just
feel
one
like
thing
I
I
kind
want to
of
say.
ruined my without having that picture. Well, it was more ominous there. Okay, go ahead.
So last thing, random health, of course, complete fantasy idea, but I thought it was so interesting that I want to share it. Have you ever heard of the idea that when you are, for example, bitten by a snake, your body actually immediately creates antibodies, and even just a drop of your own urine could actually very well alleviate otherwise potentially lethal shocks?
I'm a
Of
snake
course, this
oil
is
salesman. That's
not
a good
advice or
song.
anything, but when I heard this, I was like, wow, this makes so much sense. Something to look deeper into, because it is another one of these things where people get crazy scared and are like, oh my God, I need to run to the doctor and so on. And I'm always thinking, how did people survive before these ultra socialist, medical systems everywhere? The body must be a wonderful thing anyways. So, I would not be surprised if there may be something to this
Memory,
fantasy.
why do you not get it when I'm telling Why do you not? How do you not get it? He's the bad guy. That was the horror show.
Who are we talking about?
Luc Montagnier,
Oh,
right? Because I was talking about like CIA aides and saying that it was like worse than the CIA, and I was saying that this goes back even further and involves the international neoliberal communist conspiracy that the John Birch Society feverish nightmare dream warned you about, and that this involves and how curious it is that there's a conspiracy perhaps that these places with the most resources would be given a sexually transmitted disease that completely decimates their population, right? And who would do that? Is it perhaps the Club of Rome, who had the computers saying that this major population outbreak from conservative Middle Easterners and Africans would somehow cause a problem in the early 20th century? I don't know. Could it be? All right. I'll just try to be like, this town doesn't get nuance, It's just, okay. Greetings from the future, bro. What's up? Open your heart, memory, man. I love you all. Lessons from Operation Denver, the KGB's massive AIDS disinformation campaign. Do you guys know about this one? 85. Soviet State Security KGB informed the Warsaw Pact foreign intelligence agencies that it had launched a new major disinformation campaign. We were carrying out a complex of active measures in connection with the appearance in recent years of a new dangerous disease in the United States known as AIDS. The KGB explained that the goal of the measure was to create a favorable opinion for the U.S. abroad, namely that this disease is the result of secret experiments by the USA's Secret Service and the Pentagon with a new type of biological weapons that have spun out of control. Most likely, the KGB had initiated the disinformation campaign as early as 1983, but the September 1985 document obtained by Christopher Nering from the former Bulgarian State Security Archive is the earliest conclusive evidence that's turned up so far. So this is also, to my point, that this is bigger than the CIA. This is bigger than the United States. This is that internationalist effort to create this new disease. And it's something that came probably out of Europe, out of the European labs, right? Maybe out of Belgium, but with the help of the British and the French. And with the British and the French communists, which is also interesting because gets back to the Catholics and liberation theology. But yeah, I don't know. I mean,
can you summarize in one sentence what was the goal of that propaganda thing? They wanted to make it seem the West doesn't have their stuff together, or it's weapons, or
make America look like biochemical warfare is sneaking out, and it's the United States' fault, essentially.
Okay, all right.
America is doing all these egregious things that are endangering the common good of the everyman.
Well, certainly they are, but I don't think it's the way that the KGB explained it to you.
Right. No, it's interesting, though, because it's like, at that point, how close is that to the conspiracy theory that the CIA have created something? So you have to go even further and be like, okay, this is bigger. This is the Five Eyes. This is the Club of Rome. And this is something that's actually has to do with liberation theology and population control. And so that's
it does. It totally does. But it reminds me of the recent Sea story where the one side says, "Oh, it's from the pangolin." The other side says, "Oh, it's the Wuhan China lab." And some people understand that you model these things in a computer. So
that's another example.
You can stack these conspiracies against each other to give each other credence, but still the truth may still be somewhere else.
But that's a great example also. So like you look at the Wuhan lab and the fact that it's in Wuhan, which is the Chicago of China, it's a manufacturing hub that happened because of Kissinger. And so it's the neoliberal trilateral commission that actually has control over manufacturing and who's doing it, right? It's Bill Gates, the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation laboratory finances from Canada. So already you're seeing, sure, like the United States, maybe the CIA is involved with this, but my God, if it's not older and bigger, I mean, it looks like from all of this information that this is happening in the 1940s and 50s already, that there are eugenicists from France and Britain and South America and Africa. They're figuring this out, and that are connected with the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church is involved with building these supercomputers to figure out the incoming population problems, not just in the world, right, but everywhere, and where it'll be and what's going to happen, and based on all sorts of factors. Idiopolitical, environmental.
Oh, my good shepherd.
Yeah. So I think that it's just such a bigger thing is all I was saying. But did we do Donald Marshall?
Agreed. It's always a bigger thing. So we're almost through for this section, and we can wrap it up for today.
I know
This
I'm
I
the
just wanted
worst.
to point out. I think you've seen. Maybe we've even discussed this before. This seems to be a completely insane testimony of someone claiming cloning centers and also some strange, like you're being put there when you're dreaming and so on. I cannot. How should I say? Parts of this seem to be more relevant or interesting than others. However, I have to say that, and we talked about this before, the core idea, aside from all the more fancy things he talks about, which may or may not be true to some extent or not, but the core idea that cloning capacities may be much more advanced than what is publicly acknowledged, I heard from too many different sources, not even exclusively only online, that I'm like, well, we can probably assume that. So it then doesn't
Yeah.
mean that every
What really blows
political
my
actor
mind
is a clone, but it
but
means that
like,
technically it's possible to
oh yeah,
create
it's
something like
super
that.
easy to clone people. That's no problem. What really blows my mind is mind uploading is easier than I thought. Right?
Well,
Like,
that's the
so
thing he's kind of claiming in here,
yeah,
that there's some kind of techniques for that, which
for sure.
I I would
So I
I
mean, think
mean
of
I
it like
want to
this.
know more about, let's say.
Think about like the most simple way to do it. So, you're used to already taking information in, processing it, and we've already gotten to the point where we're used to people acclimating to the same kind of laugh tracks in sitcoms and reactions in movies. So, if you can then, from a very early point, like as soon as this person's born, start giving them complete control over their senses, and their EEG waves are controlled, you could send the signals in such a fast rate that the mind could automatically go through the entire if you have an entire recording of the correct EEGs you want to have processed, you could just run them super fast. And so the mind can actually go through them the way that they would normally be processed, because they're going from one to the next effect, one to the next effect, frequency to the next frequency. And you could probably run through this in hours, because you could just really quickly, like a tape, roll through the EEGs that a person has gone through in the past. You wouldn't be able
I
to
mean,
do
I
necessarily
understand that's
everybody
the
unless you had
science
everything recorded.
fiction variant of it, and what some people like this guy here are claiming. Yeah, I mean, I
No, I
can
mean, like,
imagine
literally,
it, but
if you put someone in the correct radio path, that exact same frequencies play, the exact same responses are hit. And if you do that fast enough, you know, the way that we're experiencing things, you can imagine like a DMT tryptamine experience, like a dream. If you can control the exact same frequencies to play through that DMT dream, that, I mean, normally what happens is your mind wanders into different places. But if you
what
don't
I
have a
understand
mind
is
yet,
is
and
the
you're able
idea
to,
that I'm basically uploading, let's say, a file copy of the other consciousness, and this
I mean, it's
tape
really
is
close to that. It's a lot
uploading
closer to
that,
that than would seem
or is
reasonable.
it, because here I would wonder if that really works that way. I'm not saying it's not possible, but
No, I
I'd
mean, like,
wonder if
that's the
that is in
way.
use.
Yeah.
But then the other, and anyhow, this guy also talks about a few of those variants. So people who want to speculate on that, you can go listen to this guy. It's interesting enough to listen to. But the other thing I'd more think about is whether it's not more about tuning to a certain frequency, because unless I can really compress all of
This
the
is also
information
true.
and intricacies and everything within 8 hours, no matter how fast I replay it, I'm not sure if there isn't still, I mean, what is too much data? But if all of these things even can be quantified, or if it's not more about tuning to something, because even here with the clones, is it really just about giving you the same childhood memory, or is it not more about being attuned to a certain frequency, to a certain state of mind, which then again, of course, brings up the whole Hollywood alter ego idea, where so many people are claiming, oh, when I'm on stage, I'm more or less channeling, for better or worse, let's say,
Right.
and allowing some other entity to tune in or tune myself to a particular
That's
frequency.
why so many of these entertainers are bastard royals, right? Like, it's because you have to have the
Well,
blood.
that's another thing. Oh yeah, okay, well, yeah, good point.
You can think about like DNA as quantum computers. I was looking up some people on that, actually. I would like to bring up what's his name? Hold on. I just found this guy that you would love. Pyotr Garyayev, who does wave genetics.
Gurdjieff? No, okay, someone else.
Yeah. First thing
Gurdjieff.
he,
No, it's not Gurdjieff. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
once
Go ahead.
Gariev, something like that. Anyway, he was doing
Gotta
research
learn
on
Russian.
how
It's
to
time.
cure. I know, right? It would be a privilege, but they can cure diseases with waves, and this is kind of furthering the research that we've looked at with Rife machines. This is way further though. You got to go. I mean, this stuff is amazing, and this is 2013. So he's been on it for a while, curing diseases and making Russia a better place, a great place again, kind of guy. But he also is into wave genetics, which is this idea that your DNA are quantum computers that are wirelessly connected to each other, and they're picking up on frequencies, and there are certain frequencies, like I guess you would say, like frequency. What would you say? Like not quite interdimensional beings, like like quantum states. There's like quantum states that we would interact with, and you could probably tune your DNA to certain quantum states through epigenetics, environmental training. But if you don't, then there's also people that have held on to that genetically, and so that goes through generationally. But also, yeah, memetics seem to be like a major way as well. So you can train people to pick up on those things. The other one was
So even though overall I'm not necessarily for genetic alteration, I am aware that there is a constant epigenetic reorganization going on anyways. And just in terms of, let's say, practical use and feasibility, I would see whatever this wave genetics is exactly. I want to look at it more. And I was just typing to send it to some friends so they check it out as well. But this seems a lot more viable and holistic than CRISPR splicing around, which I think is a complete reductionist joke still. Yeah. So whatever these guys are doing, I want to know more about, because then maybe it can be achieved, at least for those who want it, in a more sustainable fashion, because this cutting around really seems so mechanistic, narrow-minded to me, I have to say. So
yeah, I feel like you
anyhow.
have to do both. You know, it's true. You have to look at it mechanistically because we're talking about like downloading and uploading, and we're using metaphors for things that we can achieve. So virtually, we've been able to get all these things achieved, so we understand how they can be done, or that they can, what the consequences of them being done will be, and then we can learn ways in the real world to do those things, right? So if there are, I mean, but that's two different things, because one is, can you force the same path to cause the same results so that you can basically duplicate the experiences recordings, which I think you can. That's the idea of recording the EEGs and then having it played out, and the fact that people can have so many people are mind
Yeah, but
controlled
wouldn't
with
it
the same
also
responses.
mean that that's what I want to say? Would it really have the same responses and so on? I mean, at the same time, we could say,
If you
look at
force
the
them to,
wait. We could at the same time we could say, look at the existing herd mentality existing in many places, so it's working
right.
well enough, even
But like if
without
you're
100% input control. So
you're putting
I'm
in
not
the
sure.
you're putting in the stimuli and you're putting in the response. So the EEGs are causing the stimuli of what they're feeling, and then you're causing the response. We were talking about free will earlier. This is the destruction of free will, because for a moment they're actually thinking what they want to happen is what's happening, because you're making the brain feel what wants to happen and then
All
making
right.
it. So it's the whole thing, and it's going. So, and then you're gonna laugh, and then you're gonna be crap. It's all through the thing. That's different though than what you're talking about, which is um like entities of like how would you say it, like interdimensional non-local fields, because interdimensional non-local fields we might think of as beings, right? And that could be, I think that's a lot of what the that's very David Icke territory to say that there are noble families, or these royal families that are trying to keep their bloodline the same so that they can talk to, or their blood can be interacting with, or frequency receivers for that non-local interdimensional
I mean, and just
radio
briefly, and we
station.
can use this then as a closer. Have you seen this Kim Kardashian costume?
Oh yeah, dude, where she took off
Some
all her
call her
clothes.
no, she has. I mean, it's not really. Well, she has a skin, let's say.
I
Some
was
likes
making
to
a
call
joke.
her Kim Kardashian. But
Oh yeah. No, I was just thinking because she's the reptilian look. She
yes,
looked like
yes,
a Star
exactly.
Trek
Yes,
character. So I'm just
exactly.
saying that's her without any makeup, was the kind of,
Right. Yes,
yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know. I liked it. I feel like, hey, if you can afford to do that level of cosplay, and she wants to, good for her. I don't know. Like, we had a lot more problems going on. I feel like that was a cry for distraction from the election and things.
Well, I'm sure if she and that media op is completely unaffiliated to any type of human tea, then, I have no problem with it whatsoever.
Right, yeah. Did you want to show? Wait. We were maybe gonna show the Clonade thing. What Britney Spears has a new music video? No, this is 15 years.
Oh
ago.
yeah,
No,
no, but that's kind of funny because this guy who I showed earlier, who's talking about all of that, he's bringing up this as an example, claiming that, yeah, basically she's in on it and that's why she went crazy. And in this video, she's showing how she's like breaking a clone lab, basically. And it's true, that's what you can see in the animation. What that really then means, I can't say, but it's there. And I just thought it's funny that Britney Spears has an animation
I feel like Britney
like
Spears has seen some crazy stuff. I would not be surprised at all. But
that. That's what this guy is suggesting as
show
well.
me,
Yeah.
like, Britney Spears probably seen more things than you'll ever see. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's our if you're looking for corporations to invest in.
Right. Last segment, investment,
This
not
is
advice.
Not advice. Or this is about the next line. This is not economic advice. But this is Clonade, pioneers in human cloning. They were the first to openly admit to achieving their own clone. I think it's 97. They say that they have Eve running around Israel. Yeah. Epstein's involved. What did you want to say about the Raelians and their cloning lab? Or Elon Musk?
I just know
Where
that
we
you
go
love
with
to
this?
talk about this, and I just was like, oh, since cloning came up, and I thought this interview was interesting, I cannot, complete the section without just putting the Clonate link there, so people can see, there's mainstream history for this as well.
Yeah. These are the kind
Although
of
the website
websites-
looks like it's still from '97, like what's
That's what I said.
going
These are the
on?
kind of websites that really freak me out because you can tell this is like one of those.
They don't need a
They
website,
don't need a freaking website. You know what I mean? Like if you want to contact them, ooh, it's just wild. Yeah, that's crazy. Bill Clinton requested that private companies pass their own moratorium on cloning, and that was the beginning. Good job. Yeah, cloning's been going on for a long time. Cool.
Yeah, let's cue up some music, Andreas.
All right. Which one you want? This is nice.
Yeah, that one, yeah. Thank you, Andreas. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you, bro. Everybody, later.
Look past the headlines, the stories unkind. There's a little good somewhere in every soul. A flicker of light, a glimmer of gold. Say something nice about Kamala Harris. Have a positive thought about Cheney and Bush. Tell me something beautiful about Whoopi Goldberg. I wanna see things in a positive light. Let's take a step back and open our minds. Look past the headlines, the stories unkind. There's a little good somewhere in every soul. A flicker of light, a glimmer of gold. Say something nice about Kamala Harris. Have a positive thought about Cheney and Bush. Tell me something beautiful about Whoopi Goldberg. I wanna see things in a positive light. It's easy to judge from the sidelines we stand, but we're all